Chapter 1849. The life and death gamble had ended. The experts of the two divine kingdoms had completely different expressions. The atmosphere was completely different. On the Luo Shui divine kingdom side, Su Chen and the generals were in high spirits. They raised their arms and cheered excitedly. Their faces were flushed with excitement. Their eyes were surging with deep reverence as they shouted, Ji Tianqing, white-clothed killing god, hero, and other names. Divine Emperor Chongyun also revealed a gratified smile. He was in high spirits as he stroked his beard and nodded repeatedly to express his praise. On the Heaven and Divine Kingdom side, Yi Liushui's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His eyes were scarlet like blood and his entire body surged with blood-red flames of killing intent. Originally, there were 9 generals by his side. But now, there were only 2 left. One was the weakest and didn't go up. The other was the one who decisively admitted defeat and was heavily injured. Those 2 generals were the same as the 50 divine guards. They all had expressions of grief as if their parents had died. Their expressions were extremely dispirited. The 8 Tribulation Realm generals were all elite generals of the Heaven and Divine Kingdom. They were martial lords whose names shook the entire region. But in the end, they were all defeated by Ji Tianqing's sword. 7 of them were killed. Only one of them admitted defeat on the spot. Only then could they drag out an ignoble existence. From the beginning to the end of the life and death gamble, not more than 2 hours had passed. What a disgrace that was! Everyone was filled with shame and anger. They couldn't even raise their heads, nor did they have the face to look at the expressions of the Luo Shui generals. After a moment, Ji Tianqing put away the burial of heaven. His sharp eyes searched the ground for the god-splitting bow. However, the god-splitting bow had already disappeared. He didn't even need to guess to know that the bow was most likely Yi Liushui's treasure. Yi Liushui must have taken back the bow in the chaos to avoid being exposed. Ji Tianqing originally planned to pursue this matter. Since the bow had already disappeared, he didn't want to waste his breath. After all, even if he brought it up, Yi Liushui would flatly deny it. He looked at Yi Liushui with an indifferent expression and said with a deep voice, Yi Liushui, the gamble is over. Accept your loss. Divine Emperor Chongyun also took a few steps forward. He looked at Yi Liushui with a sharp gaze and shouted, Yi Liushui, your Heaven and Divine Kingdom lost. Now it's time for you to fulfill your promise, return the 20 mining areas, and withdraw your army. For tonight's duel, we have already established a Heaven and Earth covenant. If you don't want to become the laughingstock of the entire continent, don't even think about denying it. Yi Liushui slowly raised his head and glared at Saint Emperor Chongyun with bloodshot eyes. He shouted in a hoarse voice, Su Chongyun, don't be complacent. This emperor did not lose to you, but lost to a peerless monster, Ji Tianqing. Don't worry, this emperor has always been a man of his word and will absolutely not go back on it. Within 3 days, this emperor will return those mines to you and withdraw from this place. After saying that, he looked at Ji Tianqing with a venomous gaze and said in a cold voice, Ji Tianqing, you are good, very good. I will remember you. Don't worry, we'll meet again. Tonight's enmity, this emperor will definitely repay it tenfold. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and turned around to step into the night sky. 2 generals and more than 50 immortal guards hurriedly followed him and returned to the Heaven Extinction Camp. Ji Tianqing looked at Yi Liushui's back and sneered. At that time, I'm afraid you will be even more humiliated than tonight. A firm and confident voice floated in the night sky. Saint Emperor Chongyun, Su Chen, and the others all looked at Ji Tianqing in shock, admiring his confidence and courage. Yi Liushui and the others naturally heard this sentence. His body stiffened, but his footsteps only paused for a moment before he sped up and left. After Yi Liushui and the others left, Ji Tianqing turned around and walked out of the 5-colored light shield. Saint Emperor Chongyun hurriedly greeted him and asked about his injuries with concern. Ji Tianqing, how are your injuries? Are they serious? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said indifferently, It's just a minor injury, nothing to worry about. Saint Emperor Chongyun was still worried and hurriedly released his divine sense to check his injuries. He said, the golden bow that Pang Shui used is most likely Yi Liushui's soul-splitting bow. It's a saint-grade magic treasure. You were injured by the arrow intent and your divine soul is also injured. You must not be careless. After checking Ji Tianqing's injuries, He took out a crystal white jade bottle from his space ring and handed it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, here is a divine soul jade crystal pill. It's a saint-grade elixir given to this emperor by the divine master. It's specially used to nourish and heal the divine soul. This emperor has been keeping it and is reluctant to use it unless it's a critical moment. Quickly take this saint-grade elixir. Not only can it heal your divine soul, but it can also strengthen your divine soul. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and asked with a smile, such a precious saint-grade elixir given by the divine master must be a priceless treasure. Are you really going to give it to me? Saint Emperor Chongyun hurriedly nodded and said sincerely, you've helped this emperor a great deal. It's only right for this emperor to give you a saint-grade elixir. When we return to Sun City, this emperor will have to think about how to thank you. Since he said so, Ji Tianqing didn't stand on ceremony and took the jade bottle. I'll take this divine soul jade crystal pill. If there's nothing else, I'll go back to Sun City to heal first. Saint Emperor Chongyun hurriedly nodded and said, okay, this emperor will send Su Chan and the 2 generals to escort you back. There are still some things here that this emperor needs to take care of. Ji Tianqing wanted to refuse. However, Su Chan and the 2 generals were very enthusiastic. They came over excitedly and bowed to him as if they were extremely honored. Ji Tianqing could only give up. He took Su Chan and the 2 generals away from the peak of Drifting Cloud Mountain and returned to Sun City. After Ji Tianqing left, Saint Emperor Chongyun cast a spell and removed the defensive formation at the peak. The inside of the 5-colored light shield had turned into a deep pit filled with holes and ravines. After the formation was removed, the originally calm Drifting Cloud Mountain started shaking violently, making muffled rumbling sounds. In just a few breaths, a dozen wide cracks appeared on the ground, extending from the peak to the middle of the mountain. The entire Drifting Cloud Mountain was torn apart. It was on the verge of collapsing, and countless mud and boulders had collapsed. Seeing this, the generals were all shocked. They were even more in awe of Ji Tianqing. Everyone knew that Drifting Cloud Mountain had been protected by the formation before, so it looked fine. Now that the formation wasn't protecting it, the cracks inside the mountain were exposed. Fortunately, there was a saint-level formation supporting it. Otherwise, this 10,000-meter-tall mountain would have been destroyed in the battle and become a pile of ruins. Afterward, Saint Emperor Chongyun took a few generals and rushed to the mines deep underground. He gathered troops and horses to guard them. After setting up the defenses, Saint Emperor Chongyun returned to Sun City. Chapter 1850. After Ji Tianqing returned to setting Sun City, he stayed in a secret room in Pine Courtyard. He consumed the divine soul jade crystal pill and began to heal. As soon as the white pill entered his stomach, it immediately emitted a cool and refreshing aura that spread into his blood vessels and spread throughout his limbs and bones. Ji Tianqing's internal organs were injured, and he felt a burning pain. Under the comfort of the cold air, the piercing pain also quickly disappeared. Immediately after, the majestic and mighty medicinal power converged towards his sea of consciousness like a rolling river, and began to repair the damage to his soul. Ji Tianqing closed his eyes and circulated his energy, but a gratified smile appeared on his lips. Luo Xueqi really listened to my suggestion and improved the divine soul jade crystal pill. Its effects are 3 times stronger, and its energy is even purer. The divine soul jade crystal pill was a saint-level pill created by martial god Luo Xueqi. It specialized in healing and nourishing the soul. 1,000 years ago, martial god Luo Xueqi had often refined this saint-level pill to reward her subordinates. Once, Kenshin had accidentally seen her refine this pill. After observing it for a night, he had given her suggestions. At the time, martial god Luo Xueqi had not taken it to heart and had only thanked him. Kenshin had thought that martial god Luo Xueqi did not agree with his point of view. He had not expected that after 1,000 years, Ji Tianqing would consume a saint-level pill refined by martial god Luo Xueqi. Only now did he understand that martial god Luo Xueqi had listened to his suggestion and taken it to heart. 3 days had passed without him noticing. The people and army of setting Sun City, as well as the surrounding mines, all knew of the white-robed god of slaughter's deeds. In the past 20 days, everyone had heard reports of victory from the front lines every day. The white-robed god of slaughter had killed many enemies and subdued several mines. In the hearts of the millions of martial artists, people and miners, the white-robed god of slaughter was a great hero, a savior of the world. And in the past 3 days, a shocking piece of news had spread from setting Sun City. The white-robed god of slaughter had appeared and revealed his true face. 3 nights ago, 2 martial saints had brought their generals to the peak of Drifting Cloud Mountain to negotiate. The white-clothed killing god suddenly appeared and reached an agreement with the martial saint Yi Lu Xue. They made a bet in front of everyone. He wanted to challenge the 8 generals of the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation and hold a life-and-death gambling match at the peak of Drifting Cloud Mountain. If he lost, he would have to pay with his life. If he won, he would be able to take back the 20 mining areas and let the Tianju army retreat. The result was beyond everyone's expectations. The white-clothed killing god fought 8 battles in a row and actually did not suffer a single defeat. He killed 7 Heaven-End grade generals and forced one of them to admit defeat and beg for mercy in front of everyone. Such a dazzling battle achievement was simply world-shaking, causing everyone to be shocked in their hearts and find it hard to believe. The most amazing and heaven-defying thing was that the white-clothed killing god was only at the first level of the Crossing Tribulation realm. Even so, he was still able to defeat 8 martial lords in a row. He could be said to be invincible under the martial saint realm. This news was incomparably explosive and shocking. Everyone who heard the news would be stunned for a long time before coming back to their senses. In addition, the true identity of the white-clothed god of slaughter was also revealed. He was the #1 god disciple of the Luo Xue god nation, the #1 genius of the continent, Ji Tianqing. Although the cultivators and commoners of the Sunset City were still unfamiliar with this name, they did not idolize him. However, this didn't stop them from seeing him as their idol. They were filled with gratitude and fanaticism for him. In just 3 days, Ji Tianqing's heaven-defying battle achievements and legendary deeds had spread throughout the Sunset City. Everyone knew about it. Everyone's blood would boil when they talked about his deeds. They would be proud and excited to the extreme. After all, he had almost single-handedly slaughtered more than 600,000 Heaven-End grade soldiers and saved the entire Sunset Divine Mine. Such a heaven-defying legend was hard to come by in 1,000 years. Moreover, Ji Tianqing's legendary deeds had spread like the wind to the various main cities at the border. It would not take long for the entire western border to know about this matter. He would soon become famous in the Luo Xue god nation and become a great hero and a legendary genius known by the world. However, Ji Tianqing had been circulating his energy to heal his injuries in the Pine Tree Courtyard and did not know about this. How the outside world spread his fame and how the people worshipped him seemed to have nothing to do with him. Early morning of the 4th day. The sun rose from the east and spread its warm sunlight over the entire Sunset City. Ji Tianqing finally ended his cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. His injuries had long been healed, and after refining the Divine Soul Jade Crystal Pill, his divine soul power had greatly increased. Now, his divine soul power was comparable to an expert at the 7th level of the tribulation stage. If he were to fight Pang Shui again, his divine soul would not be injured again if he used all his strength to block the god-splitting bow. Ji Tianqing had just arrived at the living room when he saw a figure standing at the door. It was a handsome young man, Su Chen. At this moment, Su Chen was not wearing a golden robe and was actually bare-chested. He held a dark green thorn in his hands and stood motionless at the door. 2 maids stood in the courtyard, looking as if they wanted to say something but stopped. They seemed to want to persuade Su Chen, but due to Su Chen's prestige, they did not dare to approach and speak. Ji Tianqing glanced at Su Chen who was at the door. He sat at the table and picked up a cup of spirit tea to taste. After taking a sip of tea, he asked slowly, "Su Chen, what are you doing?" Su Chen strode into the living room and knelt in front of him. He said sincerely, "Young Master Ji, I was blind before and offended you. You are an honored guest of Sunset City, but you risked your life and single-handedly killed your way into the mine. You took action silently and recovered the lost mine. Compared to your efforts and noble sentiments, what I Su Chen do, and think is simply ungrateful, despicable and shameless. Although you have never scolded me, I have been thinking about it for the past few days and still can't let it go. Today, Su Chen has come to apologize and ask for your forgiveness. Please punish me severely, young Master Ji. Only then can I be at ease." After Su Chen finished speaking in a serious tone, he held the thorn stick with both hands and handed it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing put down the teacup and reached out to take the thorn. He tapped his palm lightly and asked thoughtfully, "Ask for forgiveness? Did your father ask you to come?" In his mind, someone as young and impetuous as Su Chen, who also had a martial saint as a father, was definitely one of the most arrogant second generations of the Luo Shui divine kingdom. For such a proud and arrogant person to put down his pride and ask for forgiveness, it was most likely Su Chongyun who forced him to do so. However, he did not expect Su Chen to shake his head and deny it without hesitation. He said solemnly, "Please understand, young Master Ji. I swear on my character that this matter has nothing to do with my father. You silently helped my father, sacrificed so much for the Sunset Divine Mine, and took such a big risk. When I found out that you were the white god of killing, I recalled my previous actions and thoughts and felt ashamed and unable to eat or sleep." Chapter 1851. Su Chen's attitude was sincere and didn't seem to be fake. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing nodded with satisfaction and said, You have such determination and courage. You didn't lose face for your father. You're worth teaching. Your future is bright." Saying this, he waved the thorny vines and whipped Su Chen's back, neither too hard nor too light. Golden flames surged from his palm and burned the vines to ashes. "All right, can you untie the knot in your heart now?" Su Chen smiled excitedly and cupped his hands in greeting. "Thank you, young Master Ji." "Su Chen can't thank you enough." Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand. "All right, you can leave now. Remember to put on your clothes. Don't let the servants see you and spread any rumors. Also, go tell your father that I plan to leave Sunset City tomorrow and return to Luotian Mountain." Su Chen was startled and asked anxiously, "Young Master Ji, you've only stayed in Sunset City for a few days. My father hasn't formally entertained you yet. Now that you've saved the Sunset Divine Mine and made a great contribution, my father and the people of the city have to thank you properly. Why don't you stay for a few more days so that my father can?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand. "It's just an empty title. Don't worry about it. Go." Su Chen couldn't persuade him any further. He cupped his hands in greeting and left. After leaving Pine Courtyard, he put on his golden robe and jade crown and hurried to the conference hall to report to Holy Emperor Chongyun. Inside the conference hall, Holy Emperor Chongyun and the generals were discussing important military matters. Hearing Su Chen's report and knowing that Ji Tianqing was leaving, Holy Emperor Chongyun and the generals were startled and anxious. They didn't expect Ji Tianqing to leave so soon. Holy Emperor Chongyun hurriedly ended the meeting and led the generals out of the main hall, heading towards Pine Tree Courtyard. At the same time, news of Ji Tianqing's departure quickly spread through Chongyun Palace and into Sunset City. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing finished his preparations and got up to leave Pine Tree Courtyard. He had just walked to the gate of the courtyard when he saw that the bluestone road outside was packed with people. The leader was Holy Emperor Chongyun. Behind him were Su Chen and more than 30 generals and commanders. Further back, it was filled with soldiers, captains, martial artists, and commoners. Moreover, there were many guards, maids, and soldiers gathering from all directions. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had come out, everyone bowed in unison and shouted in a sincere tone, "We sincerely request young Master Ji to stay for a few more days." Ji Tianqing was also stunned for a moment. He didn't expect the crowd to make such a big fuss to keep him. He raised his hands, gesturing for everyone to rise. Everyone in the field quieted down and focused their gazes on him. He cupped his hands to the crowd and smiled, "Thank you for your hospitality, but I still have important matters to attend to, so I can't stay." Everyone looked regretful and pitiful, but no one made a ruckus. Holy Emperor Chongyun took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. He said solemnly, "Young Master Ji, it was all thanks to your help that we were able to resolve this crisis. Just yesterday, the 20 mines near Drifting Cloud Mountain were all returned. Heaven's End Divine Nation's army of 1,000,000 also retreated. Young Master Ji, you're a great hero of Sunset City for your contributions. The commoners, the 3,000,000 miners, and the garrison will forever remember your kindness. Unfortunately, you have important matters to attend to and can't stay for a few more days. This emperor and the commoners would like to entertain you, but we won't have the chance." When he spoke up to hear, Saint Emperor Chongyun withdrew a dark purple treasure box from his sleeve and passed it to Ji Tianqing. "Young Master Ji, this is a gift that this emperor and the commoners of Sunset City have prepared for you. We thank you for your help. Please accept it. Otherwise, this emperor and the commoners won't be able to rest easy." Ji Tianqing could see that there was another world in the dark purple box. It contained all kinds of treasures and cultivation resources. He hesitated and thought to himself, even if Su Chongyun didn't give me this gift, my harvest from the sunset mine is already shocking enough. In the past 20 days, he had killed so many black spirit guards and collected more than 300 interspatial rings and more than 2,000 mines. The treasures and cultivation resources in those interspatial rings were worth at least 500 million spirit stones. As for the 2,000 mines, their value was inestimable. They could be exchanged for tens of billions of spirit stones. It was no exaggeration to say that even a martial saint like Holy Emperor Chongyun couldn't have so much wealth and resources. Ji Tianxing placed more than 2,000 mineral veins in the sword world. With the protection of the Earth Spirit race and the Xitigaba divine armor, the mines would definitely grow stronger. From now on, he and the Earth Spirit race wouldn't have to worry about the mines. While Ji Yunshu was silent, Su Chen, the generals, and the soldiers all bowed in unison and shouted in unison, "Young Master Ji, please accept our sincerity." Since they were so sincere, Ji Tianxing couldn't refuse. He thanked them and accepted the box. He didn't open the box and put it in his interspatial ring. Instead, he cupped his hands and said, "I accept everyone's gift. I will take my leave now." Holy Emperor Chongyun, Su Chen, and the others didn't ask him to stay. They all cupped their hands and sent him off. Ji Tianxing and Holy Emperor Chongyun walked side by side. They walked out of the palace of Chongyun and headed to the city square. Along the way, countless cultivators and commoners gathered on both sides of the road to send him off. More than 100,000 commoners of Sunset City gathered in the city square. Everyone was shouting and bowing to express their gratitude. They watched him fly into the sky and quickly leave. A long time later, Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared over the horizon. Holy Emperor Chongyun, Su Chen, and the others turned and returned to the palace of Chongyun. However, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians were still standing where they were, discussing with reluctance. The name, Ji Tianxing, and the title White-Robed Killing God, were engraved in the hearts of the people. They were engraved in the minds of the people of Sunset Divine Mine. After leaving Sunset City, Ji Tianxing summoned the Black Dragon. He rode the Black Dragon across the sky and rushed back to Luotian Mountain at lightning speed. On the way, when he passed by a few main cities at the border, he purposely observed the situation in them. The main cities were very peaceful. They weren't damaged or destroyed. There were only some small signs of fighting. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing was completely relieved. He could guess that the heaven-shattering alliance's elites who snuck into the main cities at the border to create chaos were mostly dealt with. The crisis at Sunset Divine Mine this time was a scheme of the Heaven End Divine Nation. Chapter 1852. 20 days later, Ji Tianxing returned to the Luotian Mountain. It had been more than 2 months since he left the Luotian Mountain and rushed to the Sunset Divine Mine to resolve the crisis. The news of him saving the Sunset Divine Mine and fighting Yi Lu Shui had already spread to the Luotian Mountain. However, he didn't contact Granny Long, and Granny Long didn't know when he would return. When he returned to the Luotian Mountain, he was rather low-key and calm, and the Luotian Mountain didn't welcome him. In a warm and elegant room in the Cloud Water Palace, Yun Yao was sitting at the table, holding a book with both hands and reading the contents of the book with a gentle expression. Although this wasn't a martial arts secret manual, it was just an ordinary book about local customs and practices. She read it very carefully and read it very clearly. Black Eagle stood quietly at the door not far away. He looked at Yun Yao's serious and attentive appearance, and a smile appeared in his eyes. At this moment, Ji Tianxing appeared at the door, looking travel-worn. Black Eagle was pleasantly surprised when he saw him appear, and he hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Welcome back, young master." Yun Yao, who was focused on reading, was awakened by Black Eagle's voice. She hurriedly put down the book and turned to look at the door. Seeing Ji Tianxing return, she was overjoyed and hurriedly stood up to welcome him. "Tianxing, you're finally back." Ji Tianxing hurriedly entered the room and reached out to help her sit down carefully. "Yao Yao, I'm back. Don't be too excited. Be careful of our children." Yun Yao sat down at the table with him and stroked her lower abdomen with a smile. "Tianxing, don't worry, the little ones aren't that delicate, they won't affect them." "Them?" Ji Tianxing was stunned, and his expression was filled with disbelief. He also became more and more excited. "Yao Yao, you mean our children, our twins?" Yun Yao nodded and revealed a gentle smile. She said in a gratified tone, Yes. During the 2 months you were gone, I had been in seclusion and cultivating with Lu Li. When I came out of seclusion half a month ago, I realized that our child was a little special. Not only can I sense their life auras, but I can also distinguish between two auras. Even before the two little fellows were fully grown, they could already sense each other's souls. Although they can't speak or use soul transmissions, they can actually transmit their thoughts to me. Don't you think it's amazing? Ji Tianxing became more and more shocked and excited. He said with surprise, I really didn't expect that our child can communicate with you after only half a year of gestation. It was too unbelievable. This was just like something out of a legend. Yao Yao, when our child is born in the future, he will definitely be an unparalleled genius. Yun Yao exuded a warm motherly aura, and an expectant smile appeared on her beautiful face. Yes. I really hope these two little guys can be born soon. Ji Tianxing thought of the scene just now. He glanced at the book on the table and asked, Yao Yao, how do you have time to read this kind of book? You even have to read it word by word? Yun Yao revealed a playful smile. She pointed to her flat belly and explained, Of course it's to teach our child. These two little fellows are too intelligent. They like to listen to me tell them stories and read the words in the book. They are very curious about this world. Every day, they have to listen to me tell stories and read books. Otherwise they will remind me. Moreover, I can clearly sense the changes in their emotions. Ji Tianxing was even more shocked. He said in disbelief, Our child is so special? They have emotions before they are fully grown? They can even take the initiative to understand this world? Yun Yao smiled and nodded. She said in a gratified tone, Other people's children have to learn to speak and walk after they are born. Only then can they speak, recognize words, and practice martial arts. Before our children are even born, I'm afraid they'll already be extremely knowledgeable and talented. In the future, I will focus on teaching them. Not only will I teach them about this world, but I will also teach them martial arts, alchemy, formations, and so on. When they are born in the future, they will know astronomy and geography, and be proficient in all kinds of martial arts-related knowledge. As she spoke, Yun Yao's eyes were particularly bright, revealing a look of strong anticipation. Ji Tianxing also nodded in agreement and said, Yes, this is a very good idea. Our child is born extraordinary, but he also needs to be taught patiently in order to grow faster. Yao Yao, I'll have to trouble you to teach the child in the future. After that, he stretched out his arms affectionately and held Yun Yao in his arms. The two of them snuggled intimately, and the atmosphere was very warm and loving. When love reached the extreme, it would sublimate and become a family relationship where blood was thicker than water. The two children in Yun Yao's womb also seemed to feel Ji Tianxing's aura. They were a little unfamiliar with him, but they were also a little curious. At the same time, they had a natural sense of closeness to Ji Tianxing, so they quietly released their divine soul aura to touch him. Ji Tianxing's heart suddenly trembled, and a strong sense of fatherly love welled up in his heart. He carefully responded to them with his divine sense. Warm time always passed very quickly. By the time Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao finished discussing family matters, 4 hours had already passed. He let Yun Yao continue to study for the children, then got up and left the Cloud Water Palace to report the situation to Granny Long. Under the guidance of the guard, Ji Tianxing walked into Granny Long's study. Granny Long was sitting at the table, looking at a pile of memorials in front of her in a daze. She looked worried and deep in thought. On the wide white jade table, there were several stacks of memorials and documents, all of which were related to the God Nation's affairs. When Ji Tianxing saw Granny Long's worried face, he guessed that the God Nation's situation was not good. Something must have happened. Greetings, Granny Long. He walked to the middle of the study and stood still, cupping his hands with a calm face. Granny Long was startled awake. She quickly turned her head to look at him, revealing a gratified smile. Tianxing, you're finally back. What you did in the Sunset Divine Mine, the miracle you created, this old woman has already heard about it. It's really incredible. You really didn't disappoint this old woman and the God Master. You resolved the danger of the Divine Mine so easily and became a great hero known by the whole nation. This old woman has already reported to the God Master and asked him to reward you heavily. Granny Long was a little emotional. Her old face was filled with gratification and pride. When Ji Tianxing had volunteered to go to the Sunset Divine Mine to help, she had been very worried, afraid that something would happen to Ji Tianqing. However, she never thought that Ji Tianqing would be so heaven-defying and give the world such a huge surprise. Ji Tianqing revealed a faint smile and said calmly, "Holy Emperor Chongyun has already given me a gift of thanks, so there's no need for the God Master to reward me. I came to find you not only to report the matter of the Sunset Divine Mine, but also to ask about the northern border. Just now, I saw that you had a worried look on your face, as if you were deeply worried." Chapter 1853. At the mention of Dark North Mountain, the smile on Granny Long's face gradually disappeared. She slowly frowned, her face became gloomy, and she sighed with a heavy heart. That's right, the situation at the northern border is getting more and more dangerous. Dark North Mountain has become the biggest disaster for God Nation. Now, the flames of war at the border have spread to God Nation. Sigh. Ji Tianqing had already expected this result, so he wasn't surprised. Demons have always been like this. Once they make a decision, they won't change it easily. Especially when it comes to invading and killing, they are even more fanatical and won't regret it until they die. Granny Long, tell me about the situation at the northern border. As he spoke, he sat down at the table and looked at Granny Long calmly. His attitude was very clear. Granny Long wanted to hide it from him, but she couldn't refuse. After a moment of silence, Granny Long said in a low voice, "Dark North Mountain has already done their best to break through the northern border and kill their way into God Nation. They have bared their fangs and want to take our Luo Shui God Nation as an example. Although I and the God Lord are trying to resist, we have mobilized millions of troops from all the empires to fight at the northern border. But Dark North Mountain's attack is too fierce, and the border is too long, so our defense is weak. In the past 2 months, hundreds of main cities have fallen, and hundreds of millions of people have been slaughtered. A large number of demon troops and powerhouses have already broken through the border defense and killed their way into Qingmian and Chonglong empires. They are wantonly killing and looting." After a pause, she continued, "Dark North Mountain's demons have invaded, and most of God Nation's troops and powerhouses are pinned down at the northern border. Because of this, when you were fighting against Yi Lu Shui at the Sunset Mine, I couldn't send people to help. Fortunately, you resolved the crisis at the Sunset Mine in the shortest time possible. If Yi Lu Shui and Su Chongyun were in a deadlock, the crisis at the Sunset Mine could not be resolved, and God Nation's situation would be even worse." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked, "Before I left, didn't I give you a demon-resisting note? Didn't you distribute it to the entire army? Why is the situation getting more and more dangerous? Did the Imperial Demon Notes not work?" "Ah!" Granny Long was startled for a moment, then explained with a bitter smile, "The Imperial Demon Handbook you wrote is naturally useful, and the introduction is very detailed and comprehensive. This old woman did indeed distribute the Imperial Demon Notes, and let the generals make countless copies and distribute them to the army. However, the various methods recorded in the Imperial Demon Handbook were not suitable for large-scale battles. Only small-scale battles and experts above the primordial soul realm could use such methods to deal with the fiends. What's more, the demon race was crafty, sinister, and ruthless. They would constantly use all kinds of schemes and tricks, making it impossible to guard against. Of course, the most important problem is that the demons took the initiative to attack, while we were passively defending. No matter how strong the defense is, no matter how tight the defense is, there will always be loopholes and flaws." Sigh. After hearing Granny Long's words, Ji Tianqing understood her feelings and frowned. Of course, he knew how difficult it was to deal with the demons. Even if he wrote a demon warding manual and distributed it to the army, the effect would be minimal. It would be impossible to change the fundamental problem. After a moment of silence, he looked up at Granny Long and said with a firm gaze, "Granny Long, I understand the demon race the most, and they are their greatest nemesis. Please let me go to the northern border and assist the army to eliminate the demon race, and resolve the crisis at the border." Granny Long had already expected him to say this, so she shook her head and refused without hesitation. "Tianqing, you have brought this up more than once, but this old woman has to tell you clearly that it is impossible. Previously, when you wanted to go to the Setting Sun Divine Mine, this old woman had already hesitated for a long time before agreeing. After that, this old woman was worried for more than a month, afraid that something would happen to you, and I would not be able to explain it to the Divine Master. This time, this old woman will not let you go to the northern border and face the demon race head-on. The demon race is not the people of heaven and divine nation. They are cruel, bloodthirsty, and inhumane. Ji Tianqing frowned and said with a firm tone, "It is because the demon race is rampant, wantonly slaughtering the people of Divine Nation, that I have to deal with them. Now that Divine Nation is in danger, there are a large number of people and soldiers dying every day. How can I just sit and watch?" Granny Long argued with reason. No matter how dangerous the Divine Nation is, there are millions of soldiers and generals to deal with it, and the 7 empires to fight together. Even if they die on the battlefield, it is their duty and mission to sacrifice themselves for the Divine Nation. And you are a god's disciple of Luoxin Mountain. Your duty is to stay in Luoxin Mountain, cultivate, and improve your strength. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was not convinced, he still wanted to refute. Granny Long said earnestly, "Even if you don't listen to this old woman's advice, you still have to think about Yun Yao and your children, right?" This sentence hit Ji Tianqing's soft spot, and he immediately fell silent. After a while he said, "If Yun Yao knows that I am going to the border to fight against the demon race, she will definitely support my decision." Granny Long was completely helpless. She pretended to be dignified and shouted angrily, "No matter what you say, this old woman will not agree. The Luo River Kingdom has thousands of years of history. How can it be destroyed by North Underworld Mountains so quickly? No matter how dangerous the Divine Nation is, it is not to the point where you need to go to the battlefield." Ji Tianqing suddenly thought of an idea. He asked, "Granny Long, you just said that as a god's disciple, my duty is to cultivate and improve my strength. Then I will go back to cultivate in seclusion now, and when I successfully pass the second heavenly tribulation, you will agree to let me go to the northern border. What do you think?" "The second heavenly tribulation?" Granny Long was stunned. She said with a strange expression, "Didn't you just pass the first heavenly tribulation a few months ago?" Ji Tianqing quickly nodded and said, "Yes. But I believe that as long as I cultivate in seclusion, I will attract the second heavenly tribulation soon." Granny Long looked at him with a strange expression and thought to herself, "What's wrong with Tianqing? Is he not in a hurry to go to the northern border after listening to my advice? That's great. I don't have to worry about him all the time. He has just passed the first heavenly tribulation, and according to the convention of the continent, it will take at least 100 years for him to pass the second heavenly tribulation. Even if he is the #1 genius of the continent, it will take him more than 10 years to trigger the second heavenly tribulation. It will take him at least 10 years to reach the second stage of the tribulation stage. By then, the crisis at the northern border will be over." Thinking of this, Granny Long could not help but feel relieved. She nodded with a smile and said, "Okay, Tianqing, it's good that you think so. I promise you, when you reach the second stage of the tribulation stage, I will allow you to go to the northern border to fight against the demon race in North Underworld Mountain." Chapter 1854. A quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing returned to the Cloud Water Palace. Seeing him come back, Yun Yao pulled him to sit down and asked him what he talked about with Granny Long. Ji Tianqing gave her a concise explanation. When Yun Yao heard that he was going to the northern border to deal with the demon army, she also showed a worried look. After learning about his agreement with Granny Long, Yun Yao frowned in confusion. "Tianqing, I understand how you feel. You are worried that the Dark North Mountain will rise quickly under the leadership of the ancestor demon god. Therefore, you want to go to the northern border to deal with the demon army and resolve the crisis of the Luo Shui Divine Nation. Because you and I both know that the demon race will only develop and grow crazily in battles. But why did you agree with Granny Long that you will only go to the northern border when you reach the second stage of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm? You know, even if I am worried about your safety, I will still support you in this matter." Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing in confusion, obviously not understanding his intention. Ji Tianqing smiled and explained patiently, Yao, Granny Long won't let me go no matter what. I can only say this to make her feel at ease." Yun Yao thought for a moment and gradually understood what he meant. She asked tentatively, "Ordinary Tribulation Transcendence Realm powerhouses have to cultivate for at least 100 years to trigger the next heavenly tribulation. Even if you are the #1 genius of the continent, Granny Long guessed that you will need at least 10 years to reach the second stage of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm. But by that time, the matter at the northern border will be over." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right. That's why Granny Long agreed to my condition." Yun Yao smiled and said in a playful tone, "So Granny Long was deceived by you because you can reach the second stage of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm in less than 10 years. "Of course," Ji Tianqing said in a complicated tone, "if I really have to wait 10 years, the Qingmian and Chonglong empires would have already fallen." Yun Yao nodded solemnly in agreement and asked, "How long will it take for you to reach the second stage of the crossing tribulation stage?" Ji Tianxing looked at her with a smile. "Take a guess." Yun Yao thought for a moment and murmured, "You're not an ordinary genius, and you're also Kenshin's reincarnation. I estimate that you'll have at most 2 years. Ordinary experts would need more than 100 years to pass the second tribulation. If you can do it within 2 years, that would definitely shock the entire Shinwu continent, and it would be called the first miracle in history. At that time, your name will definitely spread to every corner of the continent." Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. His tone was calm and indifferent as he said, "2 years is too long. 3 months is enough." "What?" Yun Yao's expression changed immediately. Her clear eyes widened, and she was so shocked that she was almost petrified. Ji Tianxing stretched out his hand and cupped her beautiful face. He smiled and said, "That's why you have to help me keep this a secret. On the day of my tribulation, you have to give Granny Long a surprise." Yun Yao gradually regained her senses and looked at him with bright eyes. She transmitted her voice to him. "If that's really the case, then it won't be a surprise but a shock. In the tens of thousands of years of history, there has never been such a miracle. You've undergone 2 tribulations in just 1 year. Not to mention the millions of warriors who would be shocked to death. Even the 3 war gods would be scared to death by you. Tianxing, how did you do it? This doesn't conform to the heavenly Tao." Ji Tianxing looked out the window at the sky and said calmly, "The martial path naturally conforms to the heavenly Tao, but that's not necessarily the case for the divine Tao. Perhaps I've broken through the heavenly Tao's shackles and am no longer restricted by it?" Yun Yao was completely speechless. She didn't know how to describe and evaluate it. After a long time, her emotions calmed down. She looked at Ji Tianxing with shining eyes and said seriously, "Tianxing, maybe you're no longer a human, but a god." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly. He held her hands and said, "Aren't you the same? Ever since my memories were awakened, I knew that you and I don't belong to this world. One day, we will leave this tiny cage and enter a more vast world." Yun Yao was silent and didn't say anything. She just nodded with a firm look. Afterward, Ji Tianxing asked about the glazed fire dragon situation. Yun Yao told him everything. The glazed fire dragon had been in secluded cultivation for the past 2 months. It had a lot of cultivation resources and top-notch healing pills, so its injuries had long been healed and it had returned to its peak. What it was most concerned about now was the problem of its bloodline imbalance. Cultivating on Luotian Mountain, the divine power of heaven and earth was of the water attribute, which could suppress its fire attribute bloodline. But no one could teach it, and it didn't know how to strengthen the other 2 bloodlines. Therefore, after Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, he said to Yun Yao, "I have a way to solve this problem. Wait for me for a moment." After that, he entered the sword world and entered the heavenly book pavilion with ease. Relying on his vague memories, he searched for a quarter of an hour in the heavenly book pavilion, and found an ancient black secret book. The black ancient book, as thick as a brick, had been covered in dust for at least 1,000 years. There was a hazy dragon-shaped pattern engraved on the cover, and 4 ancient golden seal characters were written. The Scripture of the Heavenly Dragon. Holding this precious and ancient secret book in his hand, Ji Tianxing's eyes showed a strong look of reminiscence. For experts outside the Dragon Clan, this ancient book is like waste paper and is useless. But for the Divine Dragon Clan, this is the Supreme Divine Tao Codex. I don't know if those old dragons in the Dragon Realm still remember the agreement from back then. Sigh. After a light sigh, he casually flipped open the Scripture of the Heavenly Dragon, stopped at page 80, and began to read carefully. From page 88 to page 100, he memorized the contents of the entire 12 pages without missing a word. Then, he left the sword world and returned to his room. Seeing him appear, Yun Yao quickly asked, "Tianxing, have you found a solution?" "I've found it." Ji Tianxing nodded, took out a jade slip, and used his divine sense to enter the jade slip. Originally, he had entered all 12 pages of text into the jade slip. But after thinking for a moment, he erased the contents of the 12th page. "Yao Yao, give this jade slip to Azure, let it cultivate in peace in the secret room, and properly comprehend the cultivation method in the jade slip. In the next 10 years, if it can thoroughly comprehend this cultivation method and successfully cultivate it, it can awaken the second main bloodline. Yun Yao reached out to take the jade slip and asked with interest, "You seem to have erased a part of the contents just now. Was it the core of the cultivation method?" "That's not it." Ji Tianqing did not hide it from her and explained, "But that is an essential and crucial point. As long as I don't reveal it, Azure can't completely succeed. The reason why I left it behind is for your own good, lest it becomes disloyal and harm you." Chapter 1855. After dealing with the matter of the glazed fire dragon, Ji Tianqing prepared to enter the secret room to cultivate in seclusion. But before that, Ji Bai and Xueqi had finished healing their injuries and were about to leave the sword world. Ji Tianqing let the two of them out and told them to stay in the Cloud Water Palace and wait for orders at any time. As for Black Dragon and Qian Yu, they quietly stayed in the sword world and were still in seclusion without sleep or rest. A moment later, Ji Tianqing sat alone in the secret room and opened the interspatial ring. Previously in the Sunset Divine Mine, he had seized countless spoils of war. Among them, there were more than 2,000 ore veins and more than 300 interspatial rings. He had placed all the ore veins in the sword world and had finished counting the interspatial rings. The cultivation resources that were piled up like a mountain had been stored in his ring. The only thing that had not been sorted out was the treasure box given by Holy Emperor Chongyun. Ji Tianqing took out the purple treasure box, held it in his palm, and slowly opened it. Suddenly, a colorful light lit up, illuminating the entire secret room. Extremely dense spiritual energy and magic power spread out from the treasure box, forming clouds in the secret room. Ji Tianqing looked down and found that the treasure box was divided into 5 areas, shining with different lights. Although each area was only the size of a palm, they were all independent. In fact, each of them had a radius of 10,000 feet, which was even larger than a palace. In the first area, there were 3 small mountains made of spirit stones and gems, which were hundreds of feet tall. There were top-grade spirit stones, precious fire crystals, golden crystals, and pure green spirit stones. These were all top-grade gems mined in the Sunset Divine Mine. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to investigate and roughly calculated that there were 60 million spirit stones and more than 2 million gems. This was an astonishing amount of wealth, enough for him to buy 10 saint-level pills or an ordinary saint weapon. In the second area, there was an entire mountain of medicine, which was completely made of white jade bottles. In different shapes of jade bottles, there were all kinds of pills. There were pills to assist in cultivation, to purify the soul, to heal injuries, to increase one's cultivation. All of them were tribulation-grade pills, and there were even a few hundred of them. For the next countless years, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and the others did not have to worry about elixirs. The third area contained thousands of talismans. They were all tribulation-grade talismans with a variety of effects. The most precious were the 5 saint-level talismans, which were all personally refined by Saint Emperor Long Luck. In the fourth area, there were many weapons and armors. There were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, staffs, claws, truncheons, everything that one could think of. The Sunset Divine Mine was rich in spirit stones, gemstones, and all kinds of metals. Therefore, the Sunset City had built more than 10 large workshops to forge all kinds of weapons and Dharma treasures. The imperial guards of the Heaven End God Nation and the military equipment of the 7 empires were mostly provided by the Sunset God Mine. What Saint Emperor Chongyun gave Ji Tianqing were all low-grade, mid-grade, and high-grade Dharma treasures. Only a few were supreme grade. It was no exaggeration to say that these weapons were enough to equip hundreds of tribulation stage powerhouses. As for the fifth area, it contained some exquisite gifts. For example, a set of exquisite purple heart jade tea set, 2 jars of supreme-grade sunset calming tea, and more than 10 unique gifts and gifts. Ji Tianqing's face was full of smiles as he slowly closed the lid and put away the treasure box. This Su Chongyun is really generous, and he's also quite attentive. I reckon he must have felt guilty, which is why he gave away so many cultivation resources and even gave away a bunch of gifts. After a few minutes, he calmed down and began to cultivate. This time, he wanted to stimulate his potential and improve his strength at the fastest speed. He wanted to reach the second stage of the tribulation stage as soon as possible. For the next 2 months, the Luotian mountain was very peaceful. The god's disciples cultivated in peace and did not pay attention to the outside world. Many of the god's envoys were not on the mountain. They had long been sent to the various empires or to the northern border to participate in the war. Granny Long was still on the mountain. Every day, She would receive news from the various empires or the front lines. She had been busy and worried. Every day, she had to review some memorials and make the corresponding decisions. Yun Yao taught the two children in the Cloud Water Palace. Every day, she would read a book and tell a few stories. As for Ji Tianqing, he had not come out since he entered the secret chamber. He had been cultivating in seclusion. Unknowingly, 2.5 months had passed. Early in the morning, Ji Tianqing finally finished cultivating and walked out of the secret chamber. He did not change much. Even his aura was the same as before. It did not seem to have strengthened much. However, in his eyes, there was rolling thunder and lightning, containing a supreme divine might. Yun Yao was holding a book and reading. When she heard his footsteps, she quickly put down the book and turned to look at him with concern. Tianqing, why did you come out of seclusion? Could it be that your heavenly tribulation? Ji Tianqing smiled at her and nodded. It's today. So soon? Yun Yao was shocked. She had an incredulous expression. Her eyes were filled with worry. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. It's okay. I've already passed 10 tribulations. What's there to be afraid of? Yun Yao was stunned for a moment. She immediately understood what he meant. She felt much more at ease. Then, Ji Tianqing walked out of the Cloud Water Palace with a calm expression. He walked toward the solitary cloud peak. Yun Yao quickly followed and walked side by side with him. It was early in the morning. The sun had just risen, and the morning breeze was blowing. However, the sky above the Luotian mountain was dark. The surrounding 1,000 kilometers were covered by gray clouds. There was no sun, and the air was dead silent. It made people feel uneasy. When Ji Tianqing walked toward the solitary cloud peak, a strong wind started to blow in the sky. The gray clouds in the sky also flowed faster. 15 minutes later, he arrived at the foot of the solitary cloud peak. Yun Yao helped him tidy up his sleeves and collar. She said gently, Tianqing, be careful. The children and I will wait for your safe return. Ji Tianqing smiled. He held her hand and said, Don't worry. Wait here. I'll be back soon. After saying that, he stepped into the sky and landed on solitary cloud peak with his robes fluttering in the wind. When he stood on the solitary cloud peak, he no longer hid his strength. He revealed his divine and majestic aura. Suddenly, a strong wind blew in the sky. Boundless gray clouds rushed over like a tide and quickly gathered in the sky. In a short time, the gray clouds gathered into a black cloud. The entire Luotian mountain became dark and oppressive. A huge vortex of tribulation clouds was forming quickly. Dazzling lightning flashed in it. The numerous martial artists on the Luotian mountain were also alarmed by this. Many guards, maids, God's disciples, and deacons were surprised. They rushed toward the solitary cloud peak. Even Granny Long was alarmed by the strange phenomenon. She was full of surprise and confusion. She quickly rushed to the foot of the solitary cloud peak. When she saw that the figure on the solitary cloud peak was Ji Tianqing, she was petrified. Chapter 1856. Oh my God! How is this possible? Granny Long's body stiffened, and she was dumbfounded. Her eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing, who was on solitary cloud peak. She was so shocked that her whole body trembled. If not for the presence of so many disciples of God and deacons, she would have thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. Why? Why is this happening? It's only been half a year since his last heavenly tribulation, and he's about to undergo the second one. This doesn't make any sense. Who in the world would undergo 2 heavenly tribulations in a year? Did the will of heaven make a mistake? Ji Tianqing. Is he still human? Granny Dragon stared at the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky and mumbled to herself. She couldn't accept this fact no matter what. In fact, she wasn't the only one who was shocked. Everyone present was petrified. A few months ago, everyone knew that Ji Tianqing had successfully undergone the heavenly tribulation and entered the tribulation realm. Now, in just a few months, he was about to undergo another heavenly tribulation. Everyone couldn't believe it and even thought that God was joking with them. This kind of inconceivable thing had never happened before. Over 100 people were stunned for a long time. Then, they burst into exclamations and discussions, intensely discussing this matter. At this moment, the heavenly tribulation began. 2 bolts of lightning struck from the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky. Kaboom! Amidst a deafening explosion, 2 bolts of purple and blue heavenly lightning, carrying an incomparably violent heavenly might, fiercely blasted towards Ji Tianqing. Seeing this scene, Granny Long and the others were stunned, and they all revealed astonished expressions. What's going on? Ji Tianqing's heavenly tribulation struck 2 bolts of lightning at the same time? Since the first bolt of lightning, it has been formed by 2 different types of lightning. This is too strange. I've lived for hundreds of years and I've never heard of such a thing. He's really a freak. He can't be measured by common sense. No wonder he's called the #1 genius of the continent. Even the will of heaven has changed the rules for him. Countless people exclaimed and sighed, whispering to each other. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, who was at the top of Solitary Cloud Peak, placed his left hand behind his back and waved the mysterious black sword with his right hand. 9 giant golden swords soared into the sky like divine dragons, heading straight for the 2 heavenly thunders. Bang 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 bang. In a series of muffled sounds, the 2 purple and blue heavenly thunders were shattered by the giant golden sword. They turned into billions of electric arcs and scattered in the sky. Then, he opened his arms with a calm expression. Holy golden light gushed out of his body, forming a huge vortex. The lightning arcs and lightning bolts that blotted out the sky all surged into the vortex like a tide and were quickly devoured by him. Such a shocking scene caused Granny Long and the hundreds of onlookers to be shocked and exclaim in surprise. This was the first time they had witnessed Ji Tianqing transcend his tribulation. Everyone knew that Ji Tianqing was a peerless genius, the #1 prodigy of the continent. But how monstrous was he? None of them had witnessed it, so it was hard to say. But now that they had seen it with their own eyes, they were immediately shocked and emotional. A moment later, the second heavenly thunder struck. This time, 4 lightning bolts descended from the tribulation cloud vortex and struck at Ji Tianqing violently. Each lightning bolt was purple and blue, and its power was twice as strong as before. The dark world within a few hundred miles was illuminated by the dazzling lightning. Half of the sky was dazzling purple. That heaven-destroying and earth-shattering divine might invisibly enveloped an area of 50 kilometers, causing everyone's hearts to feel oppressed and a deep sense of fear arose. Many people couldn't help but step back, not daring to get too close to Solitary Cloud Peak. More people were worried for Ji Tianqing. However, he still looked calm and waved the holy sword calmly, thrusting 12 sword lights into the sky. Bang 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 bang. The sword lights collided with the 4 heavenly thunders, causing another earth-shattering explosion. The 4 terrifying heavenly thunders were shattered by the sword light, exploding into lightning and electric arcs that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Ji Tianqing released another vortex, swallowing all the lightning bolts and electric arcs in the sky. When the lightning bolts dissipated, he stood on the peak of the mountain unscathed. His clothes were still neat and tidy, without any mess. Seeing this scene, everyone's tightened hearts finally relaxed, and they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, the 3rd heavenly thunder struck from the tribulation cloud vortex. This time, there were as many as 8 heavenly thunders, and their power was doubled. When the heavenly thunders struck, the invisible power suppressed the world, making hundreds of people turn pale and panic in their hearts. But Ji Tianqing was still the same as before. He waved his sword and slashed out 18 sword lights, destroying all the heavenly thunders and then swallowing all the heavenly thunders. Unparalleled shock filled everyone's heart and mind. Many of the god disciples, guards, and maids looked at Ji Tianqing in awe. Their eyes were filled with envy and admiration. Granny Long and the deacons also smiled with relief, looking forward to the next scene. After the 3rd heavenly thunders, the tribulation cloud spun faster and started to change. In the pitch-black vortex, dazzling golden light and crimson flames gradually appeared. Not long after, the 4th heavenly thunder struck. This time, 16 heavenly thunders struck from the tribulation cloud vortex, doubling the number of heavenly thunders and increasing the power by more than 4 times. Each heavenly thunder was formed by the 4 elements of gold, crimson, purple and blue. It was mysterious and powerful. Moreover, when the 16 heavenly thunders struck, they were arranged in 8 directions, forming some kind of heavenly way array, containing the supreme power of heaven. Seeing such a scene of heaven and earth devouring and feeling the terrifying heavenly might, everyone's expression was filled with shock and fear. Oh my God! There's such a special tribulation in the world. This is the first time I've heard of such a tribulation in my life. 16 heavenly thunders struck at the same time, each with 4 elements, and they formed an array. This is definitely destructive and impossible to resolve. Did Ji Tianqing offend the heavenly way? Otherwise, why would his tribulation be so strange? How could it be so powerful? Everyone let out exclamations and discussions, and their hearts were in their throats. Even Granny Long and Yun Yao were sweating for Ji Tianqing, their eyes filled with worry. Only Ji Tianqing was as calm as ever. Dharma body of heaven and earth. He made a sword gesture with his left hand and pointed it at the ground. He raised the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand and pointed it at the sky. A beam of sacred golden light bloomed from his body, releasing an invisible mysterious power that merged with the heavens and earth. In an instant, he merged with the heavens and earth within 1,000 miles, and his body became transparent and ethereal. Boom! 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 16 heavenly thunders struck at the same time, covering his body and the entire solitary cloud peak. Chapter 1857. In that instant, the entire sky was illuminated by the dazzling light of the lightning. Half of the Luotian mountains seemed to be drowned by the lightning. The will of heaven controlled the power of the heavenly tribulation to cover only 100 miles. However, there were still violent shockwaves that spread out in all directions, hitting many of the spectators. The weaker guards and maids were sent flying back by the shockwave. A few God's disciples and deacons were also pale. Their bodies were shaking and they almost fell down. Only Granny Long and Yun Yao could still stand in the sky and look at Lone Cloud Peak. After 10 seconds, the lightning in the sky was swallowed by a golden vortex. Tranquility was restored on Solitary Cloud Peak, and Ji Tianqing's figure appeared. He was still standing at the peak of the mountain, safe and sound. When the lightning struck just now, he used the heaven and earth Dharma body to merge himself with the world. When the 16 lightning bolts hit him, it was as if they hit the world. The power was absorbed and dissolved by the power of the world. Unless the lightning was powerful enough to destroy the world, it would not hurt him. This was the effect of the heaven and earth Dharma body when it was cultivated to a high level. He created this cultivation technique 1,000 years ago. Now, he was using his self-created trump card. Of course, it would be easy and flawless to capture the enemy. When the onlookers saw that he was safe and sound, they heaved a sigh of relief and exclaimed in shock. But not long after, the 5th lightning bolt struck. 32 lightning bolts that were 100 feet long were emitting purple, red, gold and blue lights. They were arranged in the array of the heavenly stars and struck from the sky. Not only did the number of lightning bolts double, but their power also doubled. Everyone's heart, which had finally relaxed with great difficulty, immediately jumped to their throats and revealed a look of horror. However, Ji Tianqing was not worried at all. With a calm expression, he used a secret technique and merged with the world within 1,000 miles. Boom! 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 A series of earth-shattering noises exploded, reverberating between heaven and earth. With Solitary Cloud Peak as the center, the area within 100 miles had turned into a world of thunder and lightning, completely filled with lightning. But not long after, the lightning bolts in the sky gathered and were swallowed by Ji Tianqing. He was still safe and sound. 32 devastating bolts of heavenly lightning failed to destroy the world within 1,000 miles. Their power was neutralized. Seeing this, Granny Long, Yun Yao, and the others all smiled, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. The hundreds of onlookers were also excited. They were so excited that they danced and cheered for Ji Tianqing. However, before they could finish cheering, the 6th heavenly lightning struck down from the tribulation cloud vortex. This time, the number and power of the lightning bolts doubled again. There were 64 lightning bolts. No one would have thought that Ji Tianqing's heavenly tribulation would be so terrifying. It had reached an inhuman and abnormal level. Everyone's cheers came to an abrupt end, as if their necks were being strangled, unable to make a single sound. Everyone's faces were as white as paper and their eyes were full of fear and despair. Even Granny Long and Yun Yao were shocked, and they whispered worriedly. 64 lightning bolts at the same time? And they are all mutated lightning bolts. Even a level 9 of the tribulation stage. No, even an ordinary martial arts sage might not be able to withstand it. Since ancient times, who could trigger such a terrifying heavenly tribulation? Those who can survive this heavenly tribulation Must be immortals, right? At the same time, Ji Tianqing tried his best to defend himself. He performed the secret skill of the Dharmakaya of heaven and earth and merged with the world. At the same time, he waved the sword of burial of heaven and stabbed out 64 giant swords. Sword of breaking sun. This was the 7th sword of the 9 swords of burial of heaven. Its power was unpredictable and could scare away gods and ghosts. If Kenshin had performed it in the past, the 36 sword radiances would have been able to destroy the sun in one fell swoop. Boom! Boom! There was a loud explosion. The giant golden sword and many lightning bolts collapsed and shattered. The 36 sword radiances collapsed in an instant, but only half of the lightning bolts collapsed. The remaining half of the lightning bolts hit Ji Tianqing. With a loud bang, the solitary cloud peak could no longer bear the burden and was destroyed by the remaining power of the lightning bolts. Behind the Luotian mountain, this 1,000-meter-tall peak that hung alone in the sky was finally reduced to ashes and no longer existed. Granny Long and the many deacons changed their expressions on the spot, revealing looks of shock and despair. Heavens! The solitary cloud peak was destroyed by the aftermath of the lightning bolts. 90% of the lightning bolt's power was targeted at Ji Tianqing. Only 10% of the power leaked out, but it was still able to destroy the solitary cloud peak in an instant. His heavenly tribulation is so terrifying? The solitary cloud peak is very special. It can avoid lightning and is incomparably sturdy. For thousands of years, it has been the holy land of the Luotian mountain. But Ji Tianqing's heavenly tribulation is so abnormal that it destroyed the solitary cloud peak. The first person to do so since ancient times. Whether Ji Tianqing can survive this tribulation or not, just based on this matter alone, he is the most legendary powerhouse in the Xinwu continent. It's over, it's over. Even the solitary cloud peak has been destroyed. Ji Tianqing is only at the first stage of tribulation passing, so he's definitely going to die. The continent's #1 genius, the pride of our Luotian kingdom, is going to be destroyed just like that? What a pity. Sigh. This is a misfortune for all of us, and it's also a loss for the Luotian kingdom. Almost everyone despaired, as they felt that Ji Tianqing had no hope of surviving. Only Yun Yao pursed her lips tightly and looked at the sky with a resolute gaze. She silently muttered, "Tianqing will be fine. He once competed with the heavenly Tao, so how could he be defeated by a heavenly tribulation?" Soon, her words came true. Under everyone's sorrowful and despairing gazes, the lightning bolts that covered the sky dissipated. A white-robed figure appeared in the sky that was filled with debris and dust. His white robes and long hair were a bit messy and stained with dust. However, his body was unharmed, and there was not a single trace of blood on his body. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Then, everyone burst into excited, fanatical exclamations and screams. Even Grandma Long was so excited that her face turned red. She waved her dragon-headed walking stick and shouted 3 times, "Good!" Everyone looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of fanatical worship. In everyone's hearts, he had already been deified. After all, he could compete with the heavenly Tao. No matter how destructive the heavenly tribulation was, it could not defeat him. Ji Tianqing ignored the cheers and screams of the crowd. He stood upright in the sky, looked up at the sky expressionlessly, and let out an inexplicable sigh. The heavenly Tao is flawless, and the heavens have eyes. These 4 words were somewhat inexplicable, and it made people scratch their heads in confusion. However, there was a hint of mockery and ridicule in his tone. Perhaps only he knew the reason behind it. Not long after, the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky began to change, and it was gradually dyed with a layer of blood. Chapter 1858. The blood-red whirlpool of tribulation clouds brewed for 100 breaths of time. Then, a blood-red bolt of lightning struck down. There was no earth-shattering sound, nor was there the sound of thunder exploding. Ji Tianqing was wrapped in a dark red light, as if he was wrapped in a giant cocoon as he quietly floated in the sky. He closed his eyes, and his body seemed to be petrified as he remained motionless. At the same time, his consciousness entered a dream or illusion, and he began to experience the tribulation. In the sky 100 kilometers away, Granny Long, Yun Yao, and the 100 spectators were all silently watching the blood-red ball of light as they waited. A few months ago, everyone had seen Yun Yao undergo her tribulation here. Thus, Everyone knew about the existence of the inner demon tribulation and understood its power. Unfortunately, no one could see Ji Tianqing's process, so they could only silently pray for him. High up in the sky, at an unknown place far away, there was a vast alternate space that existed independently but was also connected to this world. This small world with a radius of 10 million kilometers was the Luo Xueqi martial god's divine kingdom. The divine kingdom was above the Xinwu continent, and it was as beautiful as a legendary fairyland. There was an abundance of resources here, and the spiritual energy of the world was extremely dense. The entire divine kingdom was filled with formless divine power, which allowed this small world to flourish and flourish. At this moment, in a huge city at the center of the divine kingdom, there was a dazzling, majestic and sacred palace. A graceful blue figure was standing in a quiet and gloomy room. In the middle of the circular room, there was a circular stone pillar that was as thick as a water tank. This stone pillar was snow white, and its surface was covered with diamond-shaped mirrors that looked like thousands of fish scales. The stone pillar glowed with a faint white light, and countless images flickered within the mirrors. There was no doubt that this was a mysterious and powerful treasure. The diamond-shaped images displayed scenes of various places in the Luo Xueqi divine kingdom. The elegant and beautiful woman in the blue dress slowly raised her right hand and extended a sparkling finger, tapping on a diamond-shaped mirror the size of a fingernail. Suddenly, the diamond-shaped mirror emitted a white light, projecting a white screen in the dark secret room. Light screens, each 10 meters in length and width, floated silently in the air, displaying incomparably clear images. In the image, there was a gigantic mountain peak in the clouds. This was none other than the Luotian Mountain. Behind the Luotian Mountain, there was a giant whirlpool of tribulation clouds in the sky. Below the vortex, there was a blood-red ball of light that wrapped around a white-robed youth. Not far away in the sky, there were still over 100 martial artists standing and watching. The woman in blue raised her eyebrows when she saw this scene. Her voice was as gentle as water as she murmured, "No wonder there's apocalyptic lightning descending. It turns out that he's undergoing a tribulation." However, didn't he just transcend the tribulation a few months ago? Was he going to undergo another tribulation so soon? Within half a year, he actually successively transcended 2 heavenly tribulations. At this point, the woman in the blue dress paused for a moment. Her clear and deep eyes flashed with a bright light. "It is indeed a heaven-defying return," the woman in blue solemnly shouted in a low voice. Her bright eyes stared at the light screen, carefully observing the ball of blood-red light. After watching for a moment, she seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be talking to Ji Tianqing. She slowly said, "This is already your 11th tribulation. In the heavenly Tao, 9 is the limit. Normal martial artists only have 9 heavenly tribulations, but you don't. This goes against the heavenly Tao. Therefore, your heavenly tribulation is different from normal people. No matter how bizarre, strange, terrifying, and powerful it is all expected. Your heart is loftier than the heavens. With your wisdom and methods, you must have planted a seed in your previous life and disturbed the heavenly secrets. For the heart demon tribulation in this life, you must have already laid a foreshadowing and tampered with it." After she finished speaking, the woman in blue fell into silence and quietly stared at the scene. About an hour later, the scene on the light screen changed. The huge ball of blood-red light gradually collapsed and shattered, turning into pieces of red light that dissipated. Ji Tianqing also gradually woke up. He opened his dark and deep eyes, his entire body bursting with a mysterious and powerful aura. He seemed to have gained something from the heart demon tribulation, or perhaps he had discovered some secret. He actually raised his head to look at the sky, and a playful smile appeared on his face. No one else noticed this scene, but the woman in blue saw it clearly through the light screen. "As expected," she whispered to herself. "Next should be the great tribulation of wind and fire." Back then, when she was undergoing the tribulation, she only attracted 8 heavenly lightning bolts. The 8th heavenly lightning test was the great tribulation of wind and fire. 1,000 years ago, she also witnessed that person undergoing the tribulation at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It was a shocking scene. It was also from then on that she secretly paid attention to and helped that person. In the end, the two of them became friends. Therefore, she was very familiar with the first 8 heavenly lightning bolts. Not long after, a heavenly lightning bolt that was thousands of feet long descended from the tribulation cloud vortex. It was like a five-colored divine dragon and fiercely struck Ji Tianqing. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing special about that heavenly lightning bolt other than being huge and terrifying. However, before the five-colored heavenly lightning bolt struck Ji Tianqing, the hundreds of spectating cultivators were all sent flying by an invisible heavenly might. Even Granny Long and Yun Yao were sent flying thousands of feet away. In the next moment, the five-colored heavenly lightning bolt struck Ji Tianqing, turning the area within a radius of 200 miles into a world of lightning and thunder. The dazzling five-colored lightning caused the entire Luotian mountain to become dazzling and colorful. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing was undergoing the tribulation behind the Luotian mountain, so he was still more than 300 miles away. Otherwise, that terrifying heavenly might would have destroyed the buildings on the Luotian mountain. After a long time, the lightning that covered the sky dissipated. A huge ball of five-colored lightning and fire that was as huge as a palace wrapped tightly around Ji Tianqing and floated in the sky. He opened his arms and looked up at the sky. His whole body was trembling violently. It was obvious that he was enduring great pain. Countless golden, purple, red, and blue lightning bolts were constantly drilling into his head and 7 orifices. There was also a mysterious white wind that wrapped around his body and wantonly cut his flesh and blood. There were also mysterious crimson and pitch-black flames that drilled into his body from his feet and palms, burning his meridians and bone marrow with all their might. Even his internal organs and head were being burned by the mysterious flames. The woman in the blue dress was no stranger to this scene. She knew that this was the inevitable process of the Great Tribulation of wind and fire. She had personally experienced the terror of the Great Tribulation of wind and fire. That kind of pain and torture was definitely the worst in the world. Just thinking about it made her tremble uncontrollably. However, the woman in the blue dress believed that Ji Tianqing would definitely be able to pass through it smoothly. However, she stared at the screen intently. After observing for a while, her expression suddenly changed, revealing a look of deep surprise. Chapter 1859. The Great Tribulation of Wind and Fire was the most terrifying tribulation among the heavenly tribulations. Not only would the cultivator be struck by the heavenly lightning, but his body would also be destroyed by the heavenly wind. He would also have to endure the heavenly fire burning his internal organs. If he was not careful, his body and soul would be destroyed, and he would be turned into ashes by the heavenly tribulation. When the lady in the blue dress was undergoing the heavenly tribulation, it was also extremely thrilling. She had to endure great pain and danger. That was why she was so shocked when she saw Ji Tianqing using the Great Tribulation of wind and fire to refine his Dharma body. Other cultivators were only thinking about how to overcome the Great Tribulation of wind and fire, and they were resisting it with all their might. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, allowed the Great Tribulation of wind and fire to destroy and burn his body. His skin, flesh and bones were constantly broken and burned, and they even turned into black powder. However, under the restoration of the heavenly divine power, his body was quickly reconstructed, as if it had been reborn. His body was repeatedly broken and reconstructed, and in the process, the impurities were removed, and he became more powerful. This was indeed a shortcut to quickly increase one's strength and strengthen one's body. However, other than him, who else would have the guts to use this method to refine his Dharma body? This was completely gambling with one's life. If he was not careful, he would be turned into ashes. Only he had the guts and courage to do so. Most importantly, he had mastered the corresponding refining method, and he could control the heavenly divine power to strengthen his body. He had actually succeeded. After about half an hour, the heavenly lightning, heavenly wind, and heavenly fire that surrounded Ji Tianqing gradually disappeared. His body emitted a faint golden light, and he released a powerful aura. He slowly opened his eyes. A divine domineering aura that seemed to control the heavens and earth spread out from his body and spread in all directions. At this moment, his body became taller, and his aura became more majestic. He was like a god that had descended to the world. The hundreds of onlookers around suddenly revealed a look of shock and let out cries of surprise. Granny Long and Yun Yao also loosened their sweaty palms, and they smiled with relief. The lady in the blue dress was also shocked when she saw this. Her beautiful face was full of amazement. This is incredible. He has actually succeeded. He has done what he couldn't do in his previous life. In this life, he will be even more heaven-defying. As she murmured, her eyes flashed with a bright light. Not long after, The ninth bolt of lightning struck. A few months ago, when Ji Tianqing underwent his first tribulation, he had undergone the 7 emotions tribulation. This time, there was only the inner demon tribulation and the great tribulation of wind and fire. No one knew what the 9th tribulation would be. Endless dazzling light descended from the tribulation cloud vortex within a radius of 100 miles. The dazzling light that covered the sky was actually composed of 6 different colors: black, white, gold, red, purple, and green. The 6-colored dazzling light was like a flood that immediately drowned Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing hurriedly sat cross-legged in the sky. He put his palms together and closed his eyes to resist the attack. A strange scene appeared. The 6-colored dazzling light actually condensed into a disk with a circumference of 10 miles. It floated in the sky, enveloping Ji Tianqing in the center, and slowly began to rotate. At first glance, this heavenly tribulation didn't seem to be very powerful, However, everyone could feel that the huge 6-colored disc contained the most terrifying power in the world, exuding a mysterious and powerful aura. Everyone stared at the disc, their hearts trembling with fear. Even their divine souls were about to fly out of their bodies and be swallowed by the disc. Such a strange and terrifying scene filled everyone with fear, and they hurriedly retreated further away. Hundreds of onlookers, as well as Grandma Long and Yun Yao, were all stunned and started to whisper to each other. Ji Tianqing has attracted the 9th bolt of heavenly tribulation. He is the first one in 1,000 years to do so. No wonder he is the #1 genius of the continent. Even his heavenly tribulation is different from others. What kind of tribulation is this 9th bolt of heavenly tribulation? Why is it so strange? Everyone, step back. That 6-colored disc is too strange. Just a little bit of its aftershock almost killed us. I have never heard of such a strange tribulation. I wonder if Ji Tianqing can resolve it? Everyone was discussing as they retreated, their hearts filled with worry. In the heavenly palace of the Luo Xueqi kingdom, the lady in the blue dress stared at the 6-colored disc on the screen for a long time. Suddenly, she understood something, and her face changed. The 9th bolt of heavenly tribulation is so strange. Could this be the legendary 6 paths of reincarnation tribulation? Even though she was the divine master who controlled the entire heavenly kingdom and was one of the most powerful martial gods on the continent, she had never seen such a strange heavenly tribulation. She had also observed it for a long time and searched through all her memories before she recognized that the 6-colored disc might be the legendary 6 paths of reincarnation tribulation. It was said that this kind of heavenly tribulation could only be attracted by the reincarnation of a deity. This was the ultimate test of the heavenly way for the reincarnator. If one couldn't jump out of the 6 paths of reincarnation, he wouldn't be qualified to be reincarnated, and the only outcome would be annihilation. The lady in the blue dress was only guessing, and she didn't dare to confirm the answer. After all, she had never seen such a thing before. She had only seen a few descriptions of it in ancient books. The 6 paths of reincarnation is the will of the heavenly way. Who can surpass the will of the heavenly way and go against the rules of the 6 paths of reincarnation? This time you have touched the rules of the heavenly way. I'm afraid you will be defeated. The lady in the blue dress stared at the screen, and her eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing as she murmured worriedly. Ji Tianqing sat on the 6-colored disc, and his divine soul had already entered the 6 paths of reincarnation. It was as if he was in a pitch-black void, and there was nothing around him except for 6 different shaped gates. The 6 different colored gates were the legendary gates of reincarnation. They rotated slowly in the void, and a strong suction force burst forth, trying to pull him in. The black circular gate was like a whirlpool, and it burst forth with cold and bitter energy. That was the path of hell. Once swallowed, one would fall into hell forever. In the opposite direction, there was a white gate of light. It was square, pure, and gentle. This was the human path of the 6 paths. After crossing this gate, one would be reincarnated into the human world and become an ordinary person. The golden oval-shaped gate was like a palace gate that led to a divine palace, and a golden path extended from the gate. This was the divine path of the 6 paths, and it led to an immortal world. The other 3 gates were red, purple, and green. They corresponded to the animal path, demon path, and ghost path respectively. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to the 6 paths of reincarnation. In the vast memories in his mind, There were images of the heavenly ways, will, and reincarnation. He knew that if a person faced the 6 paths of reincarnation after death, the heavenly way would arrange for them to be reincarnated. However, he was now undergoing a tribulation, and he was undergoing the test of the heavenly ways reincarnation. He was a reincarnation of a deity, and no matter which of the 6 paths he entered, it would be considered bad karma. Moreover, once he stepped into reincarnation, he would have to start anew, accept the heavenly ways arrangement, and face the unknown. Chapter 1860. If the great accomplishment is lacking, there is no harm in it. Large like a rush, its uses are endless. Heaven and earth are merciless. The 6 paths of reincarnation are impermanent. I am the Grand Supreme. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged in the void as he chanted a mantra in his heart. He waved his palms in front of him, and golden and white divine light shone forth. His memory was a little blurry and incomplete. He didn't remember where he had learned these mantras from. However, he knew that this was a mystic technique that he had once used to resist the 6 paths of reincarnation. The golden and white light quickly condensed in front of him to form a mysterious golden and white sword that was over 10,000 feet tall. As he continued to unleash his power, the huge sword also grew rapidly and became more and more majestic. After an unknown period of time, perhaps a day, perhaps a year, the golden and white divine sword had already grown to over 10,000 kilometers tall, and it had almost pierced through the entire void. Break! Ji Tianqing abruptly opened his eyes and let out a roar that could penetrate gold and split rocks. His body transformed into a streak of golden light and merged into the huge sword. In the next instant, the huge sword rose into the air and pierced through the endless void, bursting forth with boundless divine white light. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted. The vast and boundless black void was pierced through by the giant's sword, and it quickly crumbled and shattered. The void collapsed, and the 6 paths of reincarnation also disappeared. The boundless darkness disappeared, and light returned to his surroundings. He opened his eyes and looked around. He saw that he was still sitting in the sky, and there was no one around him. Over 50 kilometers away, there were over 100 onlookers standing in the sky. Granny Long and Yun Yao were standing at the front of the crowd, looking at him with happy faces. They were excited and happy. Without a doubt, he had finally resolved the 6 paths of reincarnation tribulation. Intense cheers erupted from the crowd. Over 100 people were yelling in excitement. Ji Tianqing straightened his white robe and slowly stood up in the sky. He opened his arms and looked up at the sky, preparing to receive the divine light baptism. The tribulation cloud vortex in the sky quickly dissipated and turned into a ball of dense golden light that poured down like a flood. Whoosh! The golden light enveloped him and quickly drilled into his body, causing his magic power to rapidly increase. His strength also rapidly increased. This was the baptism of the heavenly Tao, as well as the reward for successfully transcending the tribulation. A full quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing finally finished refining the sacred golden light. Now, he had reached the 2nd level of the tribulation stage, and his strength had increased by several times. His entire body was emitting an extremely powerful aura. It was as if he had become one with the heavens and the earth, giving everyone a strong sense of oppression. Granny Long's feelings were the clearest, and she was the most shocked and amazed. This was because she was looking at Ji Tianqing as if she was facing God Lord Luo River. Unbelievable! He is only at the 2nd stage of the tribulation transcendence realm, but his aura is like that of a martial god. Even I feel reverence for him. What kind of monstrous genius was this? How can there be such a person in this world? Granny Long muttered to herself. She was so excited that she couldn't calm down. At this moment, the wind and clouds between heaven and earth dissipated. The sky regained its azure blue color, and the golden sunlight also reappeared, sprinkling down on the Luotian mountain. Ji Tianqing stepped across the sky and flew with the wind. He stood in front of Yun Yao. He looked at Yun Yao gently and smiled. Yao Yao, I've made you worry. When he was transcending the tribulation, Yun Yao saw that he was in an extremely dangerous situation. She was really frightened and worried to the extreme. Fortunately, he successfully resolved the tribulation and returned safely. Yun Yao nodded and said with relief, "It's good that you're fine. I knew that no matter how dangerous the heavenly tribulation was, it wouldn't be difficult for you. Let's go back." Ji Tianxing put his hand on her waist and turned around to leave with her. Granny Long was stunned for a moment before she reacted and hurriedly followed. Despicable brat. How dare you trick me? How can I let you go just like that? She frowned unhappily and rushed to the Cloud Water Palace to denounce him. Many deacons, God's disciples, and guards stayed where they were. They discussed in groups for a long time before gradually dispersing. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao returned to the Cloud Water Palace. They had just sat down in their room. Before Ji Tianxing could take a sip of tea, Granny Long came in. Tianxing, you brat. I haven't settled the score with you yet. Granny Long came in front of him and pretended to be angry. She said angrily, Don't think that I'll forget about it just because you've transcended the tribulation. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao looked at each other, and both of them revealed a smile. Yun Yao couldn't help but laugh. She sent a voice transmission to Tianxing and said, Explain yourself, Tianxing. I can't help you. Ji Tianxing didn't say anything. He looked at Granny Long with a puzzled expression and asked, Granny, what's the score between us? I don't owe you any money. Cough, cough. Granny Long almost choked. She snorted and said, Humph. Are you pretending to be confused with me? Fine. Then you can stay on Luotian Mountain. Don't even think about leaving. Ji Tianxing quickly pretended to be enlightened and said, Oh, I remember now. You're talking about our previous agreement. Alas, look at my memory. I actually forgot such an important thing. He smiled and said to Granny Long in a pleasant manner, Granny Long, I admit that I've schemed against you before. However, I also wanted to give you a surprise. Now that I've reached the second stage of the crossing tribulation stage, you should fulfill your promise and allow me to go to the northern border, right? Granny Long looked at him with a faint smile and asked in a low voice, You lied to me. Do you think I'll agree to this? This. Ji Tianxing was suddenly speechless. He didn't expect that Granny Long would deny it. Seeing that he was helpless, Granny Long couldn't help but laugh in her heart. You've always been creating miracles. It seems that nothing can stop you. Are you happy now? No matter how heaven-defying you are, there will be a time when you're defeated. At this moment, a figure wearing a black robe quickly walked in from the door. This black-robed youth was Ji Bai. Master, there's important news. He hurriedly walked into the room and was about to report the news. But when he saw that Granny Long was present, he quickly shut his mouth. Granny Long looked at Ji Bai and said to Ji Tianxing, All right, I still have things to do. I'll take my leave first. Tianxing, you stay in Cloud Water Palace. You're not allowed to go anywhere. After saying that, she got up and was about to leave. Ji Tianxing slightly frowned and quickly dissuaded her. Granny Long, please wait. He looked at Ji Bai and said, Ji Bai, if you have something to say, just say it. Ji Bai hesitated for a moment. Then he cupped his hands and reported, Master, I just received a message from Great Immortal. The situation in the mountain is critical. Great Immortal hopes that you can go back and take charge. Chapter 1861. After Ji Bai reported the news, he stood respectfully to the side, waiting for orders. Ji Tianxing took a deep look at him, and a look of approval appeared in his eyes. Ji Bai came at the right time, he just happened to help me. Thinking this, he looked at Granny Long with a solemn expression and said, Granny, as you can see, although I want to stay in Cloud Water Palace, I have no choice. Something big happened at home, the situation is very critical, I have to go back. Granny Long immediately frowned and looked at him with some doubt. Home? Where is your home? This question. Ji Tianxing showed an awkward expression and said with an apologetic expression, Please forgive me for not being able to tell you, Granny. Yun Yao understood that Ji Tianxing's home was the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. But since Ji Tianxing didn't want to say it, she also couldn't reveal it. Granny Long didn't force Ji Tianxing and asked with a solemn expression, Then how long will you be gone? Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and replied, 3 to 5 months at least, a year and a half at most. Granny Long thought for a while and nodded. Since you have something important to do, I won't stop you. However, I will have to send 2 experts to protect you, so I can be at ease. Ji Tianxing quickly waved his hand and refused. That's not necessary, Ji Bai and Xueqi can protect me. Moreover, with my current strength, as long as I don't meet a martial saint expert, I won't have to worry. Granny Long was startled for a moment and nodded. That's right, you killed more than 300 tribulation-passing experts in the Sunset Divine Mine and also killed 8 of Yilio Xue's generals. Now you can be considered invincible under the martial saint realm. I was worrying too much. Many thanks for Granny's help. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and showed a smile. Take care. If you have any difficulties or needs, don't hesitate to tell me. Granny Long said earnestly. Ji Tianqing shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Only then did Granny Long get up and leave. After she left the Cloud Water Palace, Ji Tianqing said to Yun Yao apologetically, Yao Yao, I just came back not long ago, and now I have to leave again for a while. Yun Yao shook her head gently and said in a gentle voice, Tianqing, you don't have to blame yourself. I understand. I'll just recuperate peacefully in the Luotian Mountain and wait for your return. You can go in peace. However, the journey to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is long and you will definitely encounter all kinds of dangers. You must be careful. If you meet a saint-level expert, you must not be reckless. Ji Tianqing listened to her carefully and nodded. Okay, I'll remember your words. I'll come back as soon as I'm done. Then, he hugged Yun Yao and turned to leave. He left the Cloud Water Palace with Ji Bai and Xueqi, flying north as fast as lightning. After they were far away from the Luotian Mountain, he summoned the Black Dragon and had it carry them. Only then did he ask Ji Bai, in the message sent by the Yellow Dragon, did he say what exactly happened? Ji Bai shook his head expressionlessly and answered truthfully, the Great Immortal did not explain what happened. He only said that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is in danger and asked you to return as soon as possible. If you don't return, I'm afraid that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will be lost and everyone will be homeless in the future. Hearing him say this, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and said with a gloomy face, could it be the demons from the North Underworld Mountain? Ji Bai and Xueqi were unable to answer, and their expressions became serious and worried. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was in the north of the Luotian Kingdom, between the North Underworld Mountain and the Ruins of God. From the map of the Shenwu continent, the location of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was very crucial. It was a very important and unique place. Of course, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was also the tallest mountain in the continent. It was known as the backbone of the continent and the place closest to the sky. The Black Dragon sped along and flew for a month before finally arriving at the northern border. On this evening, the Black Dragon was flying above a grassland. 200 miles in front of them was a majestic border city. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai and Xueqi looked down from the sky and could clearly see the ancient city with a radius of 100 miles. The ancient city was squarish and stood quietly on the grassland. The surrounding tall city walls were built with grayish-brown boulders and their surfaces were mottled with traces of vicissitudes. The ancient city had 2 gates in the north and south. They were both tall and majestic and had a majestic aura. There were crisscrossing streets and alleys in the city, filled with pavilions and rows upon rows of houses. Ji Tianqing could tell at a glance that the ancient city had gone through thousands of years and had long since developed into a flourishing and prosperous city. However, when he stared at the ancient city and took a closer look, he immediately frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. It was currently evening and the sun was setting in the west. The dim yellow sun shone on the grassland, which should have been a peaceful and calm scene. However, the sky above the towering ancient city was covered with dark clouds and strong winds. The ink-like dark clouds shrouded the ancient city, like a heavenly curtain that covered a radius of 100 miles, plunging the entire ancient city into darkness. The dark clouds rolled and rolled, constantly condensing dazzling blood-red light, turning into strange and variegated shadows of giant beasts that bombarded the city below. Not only that, but there were also earth-shaking shouts, mixed shouts and screams coming from the city. Fires were burning everywhere in the city, emitting thick smoke. There were also hundreds of warriors fighting fiercely in the sky, displaying all kinds of magic light shadows. The raging wind, carrying with it the icy cold demonic aura and the smell of blood, drifted from the city. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed the reason. With a cold expression, he shouted in a low voice, "Damned devil race, they actually started a massacre in the city. Black Dragon, let's go and support them." Hearing his order, the Black Dragon did not hesitate to change direction and went straight to the ancient city. After a short while, it arrived at the southern gate of the ancient city. As it got closer, everyone could see more clearly. Under the 100 feet tall southern gate, There were thousands of corpses of soldiers piled up, all of them turned into white bones. The torrential water in the moat had long been dyed red with blood. The city gate and the ground were also dark red, with gravel and broken weapons scattered everywhere. As for the flesh and blood of the soldiers guarding the city, they did not see any. Ji Tianqing glanced around and said in a cold voice, "Blood God's son." Sure enough, his gaze passed through the broken city gate and saw that inside the ancient city, there were scattered white bones everywhere. After those human warriors died, their flesh and blood quickly melted, turning into wisps of blood qi that condensed into a blood mist in midair. This was what the blood god's son did, and Ji Tianqing could not be more familiar with it. His figure flashed through the city gate and entered the ancient city. The city was in chaos. Countless people ran wildly on the main road like a tide, desperately fleeing to the southern gate. Above the southern gate, there were 4 demon powerhouses that were 30 feet tall and wearing black armor. They were waving the myriad ghost banner and butcher's knife, wantonly slaughtering the fleeing people. Streaks of bloodlight and demonic shadows poured into the crowd like a flood. Chapter 1862. Ji Tianqing looked over and saw the 4 demon experts. Their body shape and appearance were very similar to the demons of the Tianxian continent. Their bodies were as huge as beasts, and their bodies were covered with black and purple hair. Their faces were as ferocious as beasts, and their bodies were wrapped in a layer of demonic qi. The strength of these 4 demons had reached the 7th level of the primordial soul realm. They joined forces to seal the southern city gate and wantonly slaughtered the fleeing civilians. Their ferocity was impressive, and no one could stop them. In the blink of an eye, more than 2,000 civilians who had just fled near the city gate were all killed by them. Numerous mangled corpses were strewn all over the ground, and it was a ghastly sight. Dark red blood gathered together and flowed on the ground like a stream. But soon, the invisible demonic power that filled the sky disintegrated the flesh and blood of the corpses. The corpses turned into white bones, and wisps of blood mist were emitted and gathered towards the center of the city. Ji Tianqing had long been accustomed to such a bloody and cruel scene. Back then, when he fought against the demon army in the Tianxian continent, he had even seen millions of corpses and mountains of bones. So he did not feel much. Ji Bai and Xueqi had never seen such a tragic scene, and were immediately stunned. It was the first time they had seen the ferocity and cruelty of the demons. Their blood was boiling, and their eyes were red with killing intent. What a cruel demon! How can there be such a cruel race in this world? They deserve to die. Ji Tianqing did not speak, and waved his palms expressionlessly, striking out 4 giant golden swords that attacked the 4 demons. Bang! 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 A series of muffled sounds exploded, and the 4 demon experts were struck by the giant swords, exploding into dust on the spot. They were killed instantly. Ji Tianqing did not stop, and turned into a golden light and flew towards the center of the city. Black Dragon, Ji Bai, and Xueqi hurriedly followed, and along the way, they saw many demon experts slaughtering in the city. Those demons had the strength of the primordial soul realm, and they basically moved in small groups of 3 to 5 people. When they encountered ordinary civilians and warriors, they unscrupulously used demonic spells to kill the civilians. If the city guards came to attack, they would fight fiercely with all their might. The entire ancient city fell into chaos, like a bloody and cruel purgatory. Tens of thousands of city guards were divided into hundreds of teams to rescue the civilians and fend off the attacks of the demon race experts. However, the strength of the city guards was not strong. It was very difficult for them to block the attacks of the demon clan powerhouses, and they were also unable to effectively save the citizens. The remaining dozen or so devils were only at the essence soul realm, but they were very ferocious and mysterious. They were of different sizes. Some were more than 100 feet tall, as terrifying as ancient ferocious beasts. Some were 7 feet tall, and their appearances were very similar to humans. Some had strange appearances. Their skin was golden, as if they were puppets made of gold. Some had the heads of humans and the bodies of beasts. Some were completely blue, and their appearances were very strange. However, these dozen or so devils were dressed in blood-red robes, and their bodies were wrapped in a layer of sinister sanguine light. Ji Tianqing sensed that something was amiss. After carefully observing them, he realized that they were not devils. Those dozen or so devils are not devils. They seem to be some strange foreign race, but they have all been demonized. They can use fiendish dermic arts and release powerful fiendish chi. How can this be? There must be a problem. He frowned in confusion, vaguely feeling that something was amiss. At that moment, the battle between the devils and the human experts reached its most intense moment. The dermic brilliance that blotted out the sky collided with the sanguine demonic fog, resulting in a deafening explosion. Rumble! The destructive shockwave was like a huge five-colored wave that spread out in all directions. The formations of both sides were in disarray from the impact. Many Essence Soul Realm experts were sent flying and landed in the ruins in all directions. The fiery devil monarch roared and chased after the white-haired city lord. They flew high into the sky and started fighting. Dozens of human race experts also spread out and began to fight with the devil race experts. Ji Tianqing suppressed the doubts in his heart. A black light flashed in his right hand, and he pulled out the sword of burial of heaven. His figure flashed and pounced into the battlefield, launching attacks on the devil race powerhouses. Black Dragon and Ji by Xueqi were no exception. They used all their strength to use their ultimate techniques and attacked the devils fiercely. The sudden appearance of Ji Tianqing and the others surprised the human and devil experts. They revealed a strange look. In particular, the appearance of the Black Dragon caused both sides to be dumbfounded, revealing expressions of incomparable shock. Chapter 1863. While both sides were in a daze, Black Dragon spat out a destructive dragon breath. The dragon breath that was as black as ink was like a torrential flood, pouring down on the crowd of devil race. Instantly, several primordial soul realm demons were destroyed by the destructive dragon's breath, leaving only a few clumps of their souls. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Those souls flew across the sky, trying to escape. Ji Bai and Xueqi acted in time, slashing out a sky full of saber light and sword shadows, immediately cutting those souls into pieces. Seeing this scene, the dozen or so demonized demons immediately revealed a ferocious look, and rushed over with murderous intent, besieging Black Dragon and Ji Bai. Both sides began to fight in the sky. Both of them performed their secret techniques and fought with each other with loud rumbling noises. Ji Tianqing moved alone, turning into a golden stream of light that flickered in the sky. His whereabouts were unpredictable, and he was as fast as lightning. Every time he stopped, a demon expert would be killed by his sword. He wantonly slaughtered the demon experts in the sky, but no one could stop him. In just 100 breaths of time, he had killed 15 demon experts, scaring the other demons so much that they did not dare to approach. There were only 13 demonized demons left, and they were busy besieging Black Dragon and Ji Bai, so they did not care about him. He temporarily stopped attacking and stood in the sky, overlooking the situation in the city. He saw that in the east, south, west, and north of the ancient city, a large number of demon experts were in chaos, fighting with the soldiers guarding the city. Those demon experts were all in the Essence Soul Realm, and there were more than 100 of them. Ji Tianqing also used his divine sense to detect that there were 2 blood gods illusions lurking in the city, crazily devouring flesh and souls, rapidly increasing their strength. Ordinary demon experts, no matter if they are in the Essence Soul Realm or the Tribulation Realm, there are always ways to resist and destroy them. But those blood gods' illusions are too special, and it is difficult for the human experts to destroy them. This thought flashed through his mind, and a cold light gushed out from his eyes. Then, he used his divine sense to lock onto the blood god's illusions nearby, and rushed over in a flash. The blood god's son was hiding in a majestic palace. He had transformed into a blood dragon that was hundreds of meters long and was circling above the palace. It spun at a moderate speed, emitting a mysterious and formless power. It devoured the bloody mist that filled the sky, and its body was slowly growing. Just as it was eating heartily and devouring the blood chi and soul essences, a golden light suddenly flashed behind it. Shwa! Ji Tianqing's figure suddenly appeared. With a grim expression, he brandished the sword of burial of heaven and fiercely chopped down. Boom! The 300-meter-long golden sword struck the blood dragon with a violent force, cleaving it in two. Only then did the blood dragon wake up as if it had just woken up from a dream. The 2 halves of its body gathered together and quickly returned to its original state. It suddenly turned its head, widened its scarlet eyes, and stared at Ji Tianqing. It roared angrily, "Damn human worm, how dare you sneak attack me?" The blood dragon's strength had already reached the 9th firmament Essence Soul Realm. It was just a step away from breaking through. If no one obstructed it, it would reach the tribulation transcendence realm after killing all the citizens in the city and devouring all the blood chi and soul essences. Unfortunately, this goal was destined not to be realized. You're just a lowly blood god's son. How dare you be so arrogant? Ji Tianxing shouted coldly and swung his sword again. Die! The sword of burial of heaven lit up with a sacred golden light. Instantly, it slashed out 18 golden swords that enveloped the blood dragon's figure. The sword flashes were too fast. Ji Tianxing's strength completely crushed it. It wanted to dodge, but there was no way it could. Bam! 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 Amidst a series of dull thuds, the blood dragon's 100-meter-long body was shattered by the sword flashes, turning into more than 10 blobs of bloody mist. The bloody mist churned violently and rapidly gathered together in an attempt to return to its original form. Furthermore, there was a smug and arrogant sneer from within the bloody mist. Ha 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 ha! You ignorant worm! How dare you dream of killing me? I'm immortal and indestructible. Even if you use up all your magic power and techniques, I'll still be unharmed. How can a lowly race like you understand my nobility and power? Ji Tianxing was too lazy to talk nonsense with it. He shouted coldly with an expressionless face. How ignorant and pathetic! As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his left hand and unleashed a sacred white light that covered the sky toward the bloody mist. The bloody mist had just gathered, but before it could condense into a form, it was enveloped by the dense white light. As soon as the white light came into contact with the bloody mist, it burst forth with a sacred and invincible power and immediately dispersed the bloody mist. The blood god's son was instantly terrified and let out a sharp and ear-piercing scream. Ah! Damn worm, what the hell is this? Ji Tianxing ignored it. His left hand formed a seal and manipulated the dense white light to quickly shrink into a ball of light. In just 10 breaths, all the bloody mist was swallowed by the white light and turned into the purest source of power, flowing back into the heaven-mending pearl. A blood god's son that was about to break through to the tribulation realm was purified by Ji Tianxing just like that. Without stopping, he turned into a stream of light and rushed toward the East City. In the prosperous East City district, more than 20 demon powerhouses were stirring up trouble. They used powerful demonic secret techniques and summoned tens of thousands of white skeletons to kill wildly in the streets and alleys. There were also dozens of ferocious-looking demon beasts and ghosts that were hundreds of feet tall. They were wantonly killing civilians and city guards in many buildings. More than 3,000 city guards, led by more than 20 powerhouses, were desperately resisting and counterattacking. More than 100,000 civilians were hiding in their houses in fear and despair. Some of them were fleeing on the streets. However, they couldn't escape the fate of being slaughtered. Batch after batch of them died tragically. Their flesh and souls turned into blood energy and gathered in the sky, forming a dense bloody mist. Their white skeletons, under the control of the demon powerhouses, quickly turned into skeleton warriors and crazily pounced on other civilians. In a certain house in the East City district, there was a 30-foot-tall blood-red giant standing in the sky above the garden. It stretched its arms and looked at the sky. It opened its bloody mouth and crazily swallowed the bloody mist that filled the sky. As countless blood chi and soul essences rolled over and merged into its body became more solid, and its strength continued to grow. Just as it was swallowing the bloody mist to its heart's content, a golden light fell behind it. Before it could react, more than a dozen dazzling sword lights struck it with a loud bang. Bam 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 bam. A series of muffled sounds exploded and reverberated in the sky. Violent shockwaves spread out and destroyed the entire house into ruins. This 30-foot-tall blood god's son was also slashed into pieces by the sword lights and turned into a dark red bloody mist. It saw that the attacker was a white-robed human youth. It immediately shouted in a ferocious tone, "Despicable worm, how dare you interrupt my meal? Your death is not to be regretted." Chapter 1864. The blood god's son did not recognize Ji Tianxing and thought that he was the human powerhouse guarding the city. As it roared, it controlled the blood mist to gather quickly and was about to take shape. Ji Tianxing didn't waste any more words. He raised his left palm and shot out a holy white light that enveloped it. Blood god's son sneered in disdain. He also released a ray of blood-red light that blasted out. Boom! The two rays of light, one red and one white, collided and exploded with a dull sound. The holy white light was normal, but the dark red bloodlight melted like snow and disappeared. The blood god's son was stunned and let out a roar of fear. Bastard! What kind of spell is this? How can it restrain my indestructible body? The blood god's son had already passed the first heavenly tribulation and reached the first level of the tribulation transcendence realm. Even the heavenly tribulation could not defeat it. In its mind, it was absolutely invincible and indestructible. However, it did not expect that the mysterious white light could restrain it perfectly. It immediately panicked. In fear, it quickly turned into a blood wave and escaped into the distance. However, how could Ji Tianxing give it a chance to escape? Swoosh! The dense white light quickly spread and turned into a huge sky curtain that covered a radius of 10 miles. The blood god's son was immediately trapped and could not break out no matter how hard it tried. Moreover, once the blood light touched the white light, it would disappear on the spot and be swallowed by the white light. It fled in fear and ran around in the white light curtain, letting out desperate roars and curses. After a while, the white light curtain shrank to the size of a water tank under Ji Tianxing's control. The blood god's son followed in the footsteps of its companion and was completely swallowed by the white light. It was purified into origin energy and poured into the heaven-mending pearl. Ji Tianxing withdrew his left palm expressionlessly and retracted the white light into his body. He turned around and was about to leave. However, a few demon powerhouses not far away noticed him and immediately rushed over with murderous intent. Ji Tianxing glanced at them coldly as his lips curled into a sneer. Humph! You're so eager to die? I'll fulfill your wish. Heavenly Dragon Palm. He raised his palms, and golden and purple light surged out of his palms. They condensed into 2 golden dragons that were thousands of feet long, and blasted towards the demon race powerhouses. Not only did the 1,000-meter-long golden dragon possess the power to destroy heaven and earth, but its body was also surrounded by countless bolts of purple lightning. Rumble! In the next moment, the 2 golden dragons struck several demon race powerhouses, causing a deafening explosion. The few Devil Clan experts were smashed into pieces on the spot. Their souls were also drowned by the lightning that filled the sky. Ji Tianxing didn't even look at them. He immediately turned around and flew up into the sky. By the time he reached the top of the ancient city and reached a height of 10,000 zhong in the sky, those devil experts had already turned into dust, their bodies and souls destroyed. Tens of thousands of feet above the ground, the sky was a vast expanse of azure blue, and below was a vast expanse of white clouds. Ji Tianxing stood in the sea of clouds and frowned as he looked ahead. He saw 2 experts fighting fiercely. One of them was a flame troll. The other was the white-haired city lord in black armor. He was already heavily injured. The cloak behind him was tattered, like a few rags. The black armor was also shattered. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest, revealing pale golden bones. Dark red blood gushed out, dyeing his armor and robe red, and spilling into the sea of clouds. His white hair draped messily over his shoulders and was stained with blood. Although he was heavily injured and weakened, he still stubbornly held on, doing his best to block the flame troll's attacks. However, his end was already decided. In at most 15 minutes, he would be killed by the flame troll. In comparison, the flame troll's injuries were lighter. It couldn't even be considered a heavy injury. Its body grew to thousands of feet tall, like a mountain made of rocks, and its entire body was surrounded by endless bloody flames. Its palace-sized palms held 2,000-foot-long flaming chains. It wildly swung them, turning the surrounding dozens of miles into a sea of fire. Ji Tianxing was 50 miles away, but he could still feel the scorching waves of fire coming at him. At this moment, the flame troll took the opportunity to raise the 2 dragon-like flaming chains and smash them at the white-haired elder. The white-haired elder tried to retreat, but he couldn't dodge. He was about to be hit by the flaming chains. At this critical moment, a dazzling golden light suddenly cut through the sea of clouds and appeared behind the flame troll. Sun-shattering sword. Swoosh! A giant golden sword that was over 10,000 feet long appeared in the sky and slashed toward the fire demon with boundless divine might. The flame troll sensed that something was wrong. It wanted to teleport away, but it was too late. Kaboom! With a deafening sound, the 1,000-foot-long sword slashed at it, cutting off its left shoulder. Countless black fragments flew out. The violent and shocking impact sent the flame troll flying. It rolled across the sky and crashed into the sea of clouds 20 miles away. This sudden turn of events caused the white-haired old man to be stunned for a moment. His face was filled with astonishment. Originally, he had given up all hope. He had been determined to live and die with the ancient city and fought until the last moment. However, he didn't expect that at this most dangerous moment, someone would suddenly appear to help and send the flame troll flying with one sword. Just how powerful was this expert? Thinking of this, the white-haired elder turned his head and looked to the side. He saw a white-robed youth standing in the sky. When he saw the white-robed youth's appearance, his pupils constricted. He was shocked. He's so young? Did he really injure the Nine Flames Demon Lord with one sword? The white-haired elder thought that the person who helped must be a veteran martial lord, who had cultivated for thousands of years like him. However, he didn't expect that person to be so young. He looked to be in his early 20s. After regaining his senses, he quickly went up and cupped his fists in the air. He said in a serious tone, "I'm Ning Tsongyun. Thank you for saving me." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, "City Lord Ning, there's no need to be so polite. Go and treat your injuries. Leave the demon lord to me." Ning Tsongyun cupped his fists again and said, "Thank you very much." After saying that, he quickly retreated far away. He took out an elixir and swallowed it to suppress his injuries. At the same time, the Nine Flames Demon Lord flew out of the sea of clouds. It stood in the sky and stared fiercely at Ji Tianqing with its dark purple eyes. Its body was surrounded by blood-red flames. That sword strike had indeed severely injured it. Its entire left arm had been chopped off. There was a neat cut on its left shoulder with many cracks. Dark red blood, burning like lava, dripped from the wound continuously. It stared at Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. It said in a low and resentful tone, "Brat, I'm the Nine Flames Demon Lord. Since you can injure me, you're definitely not a nobody." Chapter 1865. He is indeed one of the 36 Demon Kings. Ji Tianqing murmured to himself when he heard the Nine Flame Demon King's name. He looked at the Nine Flames Demon Lord coldly and smirked. He said in a mocking tone, "Is your master the ancestor demon god doing well?" The Nine Flame Demon King was stunned. He frowned and stared at Ji Tianqing with mixed feelings. "I only follow the orders of the demon saint. I don't know what you are talking about. You, on the other hand, quickly tell me your name." Although the Nine Flame Demon King pretended to be confused, Ji Tianqing could tell that the Nine Flame Demon King knew what he was talking about. "Listen carefully. I am the one who will take your life, Ji Tianqing." Ji Tianqing growled coldly as an unparalleled domineering aura burst out from his body. Hearing this, the Nine Flame Demon Lord and Ning Tsongyun, who were not far away, trembled. Their faces were full of shock. You're that Ji Tianqing?" The Nine Flames Demon Lord let out a cry of disbelief. His eyes were filled with joy and surprise. "Ha ha ha! I've worn out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by sheer luck. This monarch actually met you here. I'm truly too lucky. Ji Tianqing, do you know that the entire North Underworld Mountain is looking for you? You will die today. Thank you for giving me such a great credit." Ning Tsongyun looked at Ji Tianqing and exclaimed in surprise, "I didn't expect him to be Ji Tianqing. The #1 God's disciple in the Kingdom of Gods, the #1 genius in the continent, the hero who saved the Sunset Mine. He came to the north border and saved me personally." Ning Tsongyun was quite emotional. His old face was a little red, and the white beard on his chin was also trembling. 2 months ago, he had heard about what happened at the west border and the legend of Ji Tianqing saving the Sunset Mine. He had thought that if he had the chance in the future, he would meet the legendary genius with his own eyes. He never thought that his wish would come true without any warning. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was the first to strike. He swung his sword towards the Nine Flames Devil Lord. "You want to capture me and bring me back to the ancestral devil god for a reward? You're not qualified." Broken Moon Sword. The Burial of Heaven swung his sword and slashed out a blazing white sword light that was hundreds of meters long. It slashed down towards the Nine Flames Devil Lord. Before the sword light arrived, a formless sword intent enveloped the Nine Flames Demon Lord. It was an indescribable pressure, extremely divine and domineering. The Nine Flames Demon Monarch felt as if he had fallen into a quagmire, unable to move an inch. He wanted to dodge the sword light, but he was powerless. At the critical moment, it let out a furious roar and swung its flaming chain with all its might, smashing it against the blazing white sword light. Boom! With a muffled explosion, the blazing white sword light collapsed on the spot, turning into millions of white light fragments that scattered in the sky. The flaming chains in the hands of the 9 Flames Devil Lord were also cut apart by the sword light. The broken half of the flaming chains shattered into crimson flames that spread out like a wave. The violent and terrifying force also sent it flying 10 miles away. However, it was extremely tenacious and quickly stabilized its body. Crimson flames surged out from its body, forming another flaming chain. Even its broken left shoulder was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, rapidly growing a new left arm. Bastard! You're courting death. I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death. The 9 Flames Devil Lord roared furiously. 18 flaming pillars that were thousands of meters long shot out from its body and rushed into the sky. 9 flames of the heavens. It waved its arms crazily, controlling the 18 flaming pillars that were like giant dragons. They crisscrossed and shot towards Ji Tianqing. The 18 flaming pillars were divided into a few different colors, containing 9 different attributes. Some were violent, some were sinister, some were icy cold, some were blazing hot, and there were even some that contained deadly poison. In an instant, the 18 flaming pillars formed a huge net and drowned Ji Tianqing's figure. The 9 Flames Devil Lord's expression was extremely ferocious. It roared furiously, "Little bastard, go to hell!" As its voice fell, the 18 flaming pillars exploded at the same time. The boundless flames, which contained the power to destroy everything, struck Ji Tianqing with a loud bang. The huge 7-colored fireball rose up like a mushroom cloud, occupying the sky within a radius of 10 miles. The area within 100 miles was turned into a world of flames. Even the air was burned away by the scorching heat, turning into a vacuum zone. 100 miles away, Ning Songyun watched this scene with his eyes wide open. He was instantly filled with horror. His expression was incomparably worried, and his eyes were filled with deep despair. His gaze became dim and lifeless. How could this be? Could it be that young Master Ji? Impossible. Young Master Ji is the #1 prodigy in the world. He was able to kill 8 of Yi Liushui's generals. His combat strength is outstanding and unparalleled. He will be fine. It is impossible for him to be killed by the 9 Flames Devil Lord. Ning Songyun muttered to himself. His heart was clenched tightly as he stared at the sea of flames. After a while, the 7-colored flames that covered the sky gradually dissipated. The sky was about to return to normal. At this moment, a white-robed figure rushed out of the sea of flames and rushed towards the 9 Flames Devil Lord. It was Ji Tianqing. Even though he was hit by the 18 flaming pillars, he was not injured. His expression was as calm and indifferent as usual. At the critical moment, he used the Heaven and Earth Dharma body and merged his body with the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. No matter how powerful the 18 flaming pillars were, they could not destroy the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. That was why he was safe and sound. Swoosh! When he rushed out of the sea of flames, he was in front of the 9 Flames Devil Lord in the blink of an eye. The 9 Flames Devil Lord thought that even if his killer move, 9 Flames in the Heavens, could not kill Ji Tianqing, it could at least severely injure him. However, he did not expect Ji Tianqing to be unharmed. When Ji Tianqing was in front of him, the 9 Flames Devil Lord widened his eyes in shock and let out a roar of disbelief. No! This is impossible! The 9 Flames Devil Lord was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses and wanted to block the attack, it was already too late. God-slaying spear! Ji Tianqing shouted emotionlessly. He raised his left palm and slapped at the 9 Flames Devil Lord, releasing boundless golden light. The mysterious golden flames condensed into a golden spear that was 10 feet long and as thick as a pillar. It pierced towards the 9 Flames Devil Lord's chest. Boom! With a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens, the golden spear pierced through the 9 Flames Devil Lord's chest and exploded. A dazzling golden mushroom cloud rose up in the sky and shone brightly for 300 miles. The 9 Flames Devil Lord's lava-like body collapsed on the spot. It exploded into countless rocks and scattered in the sea of clouds. However, only his physical body was destroyed. His spiritual soul was not destroyed. Chapter 1866. The nine-flame devil lord's divine soul was a ball of dark red light. His body was destroyed, and he knew that he was no match for Ji Tianqing, so he made a prompt decision to escape. He did not even say a word. He immediately used a secret technique of the devil Dao and turned into a blood vortex. 10,000 miles devil concealment. Swoosh. In just 2 breaths, the huge blood vortex pierced through the sky and disappeared into the void. In the next moment, when the blood vortex appeared again, it was already 200 miles away. The 10,000 miles devil concealment was a top escape technique of the devil Dao in the ancient times. If a devil sage used it, he could move 10,000 miles away in a snap of his fingers. Since the ancestor devil god entered the North Underworld Mountain 2 years ago, the devil race's people celebrated and all the major forces were quickly unified. The 36 devil lords, including the 9-flame devil lord, were all rewarded by the ancestor devil god. The 10,000 miles devil concealment was a secret technique that the ancestor devil god gave to the 9-flame devil lord. After it was mastered, it was only used a few times, but it was effective every time. Ji Tianqing was about to kill the 9-flame devil lord's divine soul. Unexpectedly, the 9-flame devil lord turned into a blood vortex and disappeared into thin air. Ji Tianqing could not lock onto its aura, nor did he know where it had escaped to. He could only give up the chase. He frowned and thought for a while. He whispered, "The secret technique of the devil Dao that it used seems to be 10,000 miles devil concealment?" After a moment of silence, he put away the sword of burial of heaven and turned to fly back. It's lucky that it escaped. It won't be so lucky next time. Just as he returned to the sky above the ancient city, Ning Songyun flew toward him and bowed excitedly. Ning Songyun greets young Master Ji. Young Master Ji, thank you for saving Xueqi City. I express my gratitude on behalf of all the people in the city. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said calmly, "Didn't you just thank me? Why do you have to say it again?" Ning Songyun hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, No. I didn't know your identity just now, so I just thanked you verbally." He did not expect young master to be the #1 God's disciple in the country, the #1 heavenly talent in the continent, and the hero who saved the sunset heavenly mine. This old man has long heard of young master's deeds and has always wanted to. Ning Songyun was in awe of Ji Tianqing from the bottom of his heart. His tone was also very sincere. Even though he was the head of a city, a famous martial lord who had cultivated for 1,000 years. But compared to Ji Tianqing, his status was insignificant. Ji Tianqing raised his hand to interrupt him. He said expressionlessly, "There's no need to flatter me. There are still a large number of demon experts causing trouble in the city. Dealing with them first is the proper thing to do." As he spoke, he descended from the sky and flew into the ancient city. Ning Songyun was stunned for a moment, then nodded quickly and said, "You're right, young lord." He quickly caught up with Ji Tianqing and held his sword in high spirits, ready to fight. When the two returned to the ancient city, the chaotic battle was coming to an end. Originally, the 9 Flames Devil Lord had brought nearly 200 demon experts with him. Now, there were only 30 left. More than 100 of them had been killed. The remaining 30 or so demon experts panicked and fled when they heard that the 9 Flames Devil Lord had escaped with serious injuries. Among the remaining 30 or so demon experts, there were more than 20 demon experts who were slaughtering the civilians in the city and fighting with the soldiers who were guarding the city. There were also 9 different races who were wearing blood-red robes. They were desperately besieging Heilong and Ji Bai. Ji Tianqing immediately flew to the center of the city and joined the battle. He waved his sword and killed the 9 different races to help Heilong and Ji Bai. Ning Songyun wisely flew to the north of the city to save the civilians and the soldiers who were guarding the city. He waved his sword and killed a few demon experts. The fierce battle lasted for a while and the sky darkened again. The light from the spells covered the sky and the sun. When the demon experts saw Ji Tianqing and Ning Songyun, they knew that the 9 Flames Devil Lord was in trouble. Thus, the numerous devil clan powerhouses no longer lingered in the battle and fled out of the city. Ning Songyun led the soldiers who were guarding the city and the local experts to start a fierce chase. About half an hour later, the group killed another dozen or so devil race masters. Only 10 demonic cultivators managed to escape, leaving Xueqi City. Ning Songyun did not chase further. He led the soldiers back to the city and quickly started to deal with the aftermath and treat the wounded. Near the square in the city, Ji Tianqing's battle with the 9 different races was about to end. He had killed 4 of the 9 strange-looking non-humankind warriors. Black Dragon and Ji Bai guarded the dark side and killed 3 outsiders. Only 2 of them were still alive. However, they were seriously injured and had no chance to escape. Ji Bai and Xueqi attacked at the same time and were about to kill the 2 alien experts. Ji Tianqing suddenly shouted, "Don't kill them. Keep them alive." Ji Bai and Xueqi immediately understood. They changed the direction of their swords and sabers and sent the 2 alien experts flying. They fell to the ground with blood all over their bodies. The 2 alien experts had their hands and feet cut off. They fell to the ground and twitched in pain. The battle was finally over. Ji Tianqing put away the sword of burial of heaven and landed beside the 2 alien experts expressionlessly. He looked at them coldly. Hei Long, Ji Bai, and Xueqi also came over. Without Ji Tianqing's order, Ji Bai and Xueqi used their capture skills at the same time. They caught the 2 alien experts and sent them to Ji Tianqing. "Master, please punish them." Ji Tianqing nodded and stared at the alien expert on the left. This alien expert was 2 meters tall and his body shape was very similar to a human's. However, his whole body was golden as if it was made of gold. He was a tall and sturdy man. There was not a single strand of hair on his body. There was also a sharp horn on his forehead that looked like a rhinoceros horn. Ji Tianqing stared at him and said, "If I'm not wrong, you should be from a foreign continent in the south. From your appearance and aura, you seem to be from the Golden Glaze clan." The Golden Crystal clan man pursed his lips. His face was covered with dark brown blood. He glared at Ji Tianqing and angrily gasped for breath. Ji Tianqing looked at the alien expert on the right. This alien expert was 5 meters tall and looked like a bear. He had 2 large heads, 2 wings, and 4 hooves. He was covered with silver hair that flickered with silver light and emitted a cold aura. Ji Tianqing looked at him and said, "You're from the northern continent. You should be from the Ice Bear clan. Looking at the ice mark on your forehead, you seem to be from the Ice Bear clan?" The Ice Bear expert glared at Ji Tianqing with bloodshot eyes. He bared his teeth and roared. Blood kept dripping from the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a cold smile. He said in a mocking tone, "You and the other aliens that were killed before came from different continents. But you've all been demonized and are working for the demon race. Also, you're all wearing blood-red robes to distinguish you from the demon race. Looks like this is another scheme of the ancestor demon god. Tell me honestly, what's going on?" The strong warrior of the Golden Glaze clan and the Ice Bear glared at Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. They refused to speak. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Fine. Since you've all been demonized, you probably won't confess. Then I'll get the answer myself." As he spoke, his right hand formed a seal. He sent out a ray of white spiritual light that enveloped the Golden Crystal clan man. Great Soul Assimilation Technique. The white spiritual light immediately enveloped the Golden Crystal clan man. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Ji Tianqing also closed his eyes. He controlled his spiritual power to invade the Golden Crystal clan man's spiritual sea and search his soul memories. After about 10 breaths, Ji Tianqing finally found the answer and understood the whole story. Chapter 1867. As soon as Ji Tianqing retracted his hand, the Golden Glaze man collapsed to the ground and fainted. The great soul-sucking technique that he had just used was a famous forbidden technique from ancient times. Using this secret technique, one could directly invade the other party's spirit and memories to search for information. It was very powerful and tyrannical. The weaker martial artists who had their spirits sucked would most likely lose their lives. Even those with relatively strong souls would find their souls in chaos, and they would become delirious and deranged. Thus, the great soul-sucking technique was known as a forbidden technique. Under normal circumstances, Ji Tianqing would not use it lightly. However, the target of this technique was a demonized foreign race, a blood guard nurtured by the ancestral demon god, so he did not feel burdened. Today, the orthodox great soul-sucking technique had long been lost. Only a few incomplete techniques remained, but they were still regarded as ultimate techniques in the martial world. What Ji Tianqing had used was the most orthodox great soul-sucking technique, which was infinitely profound. He had seen countless images and information from the Golden Glaze powerhouse's memories, and he understood the whole story. This Golden Glaze man had originally been one of the strongest powerhouses in the southern continent. He was the emperor of the Golden Glaze race, and he controlled millions of Golden Glaze people. In the southern continent, there were only 7 or 8 primordial spirit powerhouses who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. But half a year ago, 2 tribulation-transcending realm demons had used some unknown method or treasure to break into the southern continent. The 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses had wantonly slaughtered tens of millions of people on the continent. The Golden Glaze race was one of the victims. Not only had millions of their people been killed, but countless geniuses and elite generals had also died in battle. In the time of crisis, the Golden Glaze Emperor had no choice but to take action and resist the 2 demons. Unfortunately, he could not even withstand 2 moves from his opponents before he was severely injured and fainted. The 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses did not kill him. After kidnapping him, they captured 2 other primordial spirit powerhouses from other races. The Golden Glaze Emperor and the 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses were taken to Xueqi continent and brought back to Dark North Mountain. After that, the 3 of them were sent to an extremely terrifying abyss of blood, and after 49 days of suffering and torture, they were tempered into their current state. Although their strength had greatly increased, their defense and combat strength had become more powerful, and they could even release terrifying demonic secret techniques, they were still able to do so. However, their martial Dao foundations had been destroyed. They were like combat puppets, and they no longer had the chance to break through and advance. They could only obey the orders of the demon race and were forced to wear similar red robes. They were named the Blood-Robed Guards, and they fought for the demon race with their lives on the line. Although Emperor Jin Lu's experience sounded tragic, Ji Tianqing did not sympathize with him. After all, after becoming a Bloodstrike Guard, he had become a demon that only knew how to kill. In the past few months, this person had followed the demon race's experts into battle. He had broken through more than 30 cities and slaughtered more than 200,000 civilians. Even the water of the Eastern Sea would not be able to wash away such a bloody sin. Then, Ji Tianqing used the same trick again. He shot out a beam of blazing divine soul light that enveloped the ice bear. The giant ice bear struggled with all his might before his divine soul was invaded and he fell unconscious. Ji Tianqing closed his eyes and quickly read the ice bear's divine soul memories. After 10 breaths, he found the answer. The ice bear's experience was almost the same as Emperor Jin Lu's. Also half a year ago, 2 mysterious demon race experts had invaded the northern continent and killed their way into the ice bear's territory. This ice bear expert was the current emperor of the ice bear tribe. He ruled over millions of miles of territory and had tens of millions of ice bear tribe members. Unfortunately, he was no match for the 2 demon race experts. After a few exchanges, he was severely injured and fell unconscious. When he woke up, he was already brought back to North Underworld Mountain. He and 4 other primordial soul stage experts were sent to a dark, bloody, and terrifying abyss where they endured 49 days of tempering and demonization. In the end, he lost his self-awareness and became a violent, bloodthirsty bear that only knew how to kill. Under the leadership of the demon race experts, he wantonly massacred the citizens of the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom. He had already committed a heinous crime. When Ji Tianqing retracted his hand, the Ice Bear Emperor was also unconscious, just like Emperor Jin Lu. One is the Ice Bear Emperor of the Northern Continent, and the other is Emperor Jin Lu of the Southern Continent. There were also a dozen or so blood-robed guards who came from different continents. The ancestral demon god's methods are truly vicious. He actually captured these foreign powerhouses from different continents and refined them into demonic puppets. However, the Xueqi continent and the other continents have long been sealed by the gods, so they are not connected. What method did the ancestral demon god use to allow those demon lords to travel between the continents? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and muttered with a solemn expression. Since the ancestral demon god can allow those demon lords to travel between the eastern, southern, western, and northern continents, does that mean he can also send demon lords to the profound sky continent? He suddenly thought of this question, and his expression became even more gloomy. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. No! I have to figure out what's going on as soon as possible. At this moment, Xueqi pointed at the unconscious Emperor Jin Lu and Ice Bear Emperor and asked in a deep voice, "Master, how should we deal with these 2 foreign powerhouses?" Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and waved his hand. They have all been tempered by demonic secret techniques and have long been demonized. They have lost their minds. I will try to purify them first. If not, I can only kill them to prevent future troubles. With that, he activated the power of the heaven-mending orb and waved his hand to release a sacred white light that drilled into Emperor Jin Lu's body. The dense white light released a mysterious and vigorous power that quickly dispelled the demonic qi in Emperor Jin Lu's body. However, Emperor Jin Lu had already been completely demonized. Under the purification of the white light, his flesh and blood immediately corroded and festered, emitting thick purple-black smoke and emitting powerful toxins. In just a few breaths, he had turned into a large pile of black ash, leaving not even a trace of bone or flesh. Only a large cloud of purple-black poisonous fog was left floating in the sky. In order to prevent the poisonous fog from spreading and killing the people of Xueqi City, Ji Tianxing used the heaven-mending orb to swallow it and let it slowly purify it. Next, he shot out another white light that enveloped the Ice Bear Emperor's body. Like Emperor Jin Lu, the Ice Bear Emperor had also been completely demonized. Under the purification of the sacred white light, its 30-meter-tall body quickly corroded into ashes and billowed with poisonous smoke. After a while, it also turned into a cloud of black ash and turned into a large cloud of purple-black poisonous fog. Ji Tianxing used the heaven-mending orb to swallow the poisonous fog. Only then did he clean it up. He flew into the sky and overlooked the entire Xueqi City to observe the situation. The war had ended long ago, and the remnants of the demon race had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1868. Seeing that the situation in Xueqi City had stabilized, Ji Tianxing was ready to leave. Anyway, Ning Songyun would be in charge of the aftermath. He had no time to waste here. Swoosh! He put away the black dragon and flew to Ning Songyun with Ji Bai and Shohei. Ning Songyun was giving orders and assigning tasks to several generals guarding the city. When he suddenly saw Ji Tianxing, he hurriedly bowed and greeted him. He then introduced Ji Tianxing to the generals. The generals had also heard of Ji Tianxing's legendary deeds. They were all flattered and bowed in excitement and awe. Ji Tianxing waved his hand indifferently and said, "You don't have to be so polite. Saving the people is more important. City Lord Ning, you will deal with the aftermath. When you report to Luotian Mountain, don't mention that I have been here." Why is that? Ning Songyun was stunned for a moment, his face full of confusion. He couldn't understand. Wasn't Ji Tianxing the pride of Luotian Mountain and the #1 god's disciple in the Divine Kingdom? He had made such a great contribution, but he didn't report it to Luotian Mountain? Did this young Master Ji sneak out? Seeing that Ning Songyun was secretly guessing, Ji Tianxing explained, "I have a heavy responsibility on this trip. I must keep my whereabouts a secret and must not be leaked." Ning Songyun suddenly understood. He quickly nodded and said, "I understand. Don't worry, young master." After a pause, he thought of another thing and asked tentatively, "By the way, young Master Ji, when I was chasing after the remnants of the Ghost Clan, I caught a captive." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly ordered, "Where is he? Bring him here quickly. I want to interrogate him personally." Ning Songyun immediately understood and waved to a general beside him. The general quickly turned and left. After a while, he came to Ji Tianxing with a blood-stained and crippled demon clan expert. "Reporting to young Master Ji, we have already extorted a confession by torture. But this guy refused to give up and refused to reveal any information." The middle-aged general reported the situation truthfully, his tone filled with hatred. "Let it go." Ji Tianxing ordered expressionlessly as he sized up the demon with a sharp gaze. This was a male demon. He was more than 3 meters tall, and his whole body was covered with purple hair. He was wearing a black armor. This person had strength at the 9th firmament essence soul realm. His arms had been severed at the roots and his body was a bloody mess. He was already on his last breath. When the middle-aged general released it, it immediately let out a muffled roar from its bloody mouth. It even used its last bit of magic power to escape into the ground. Ji Tianxing flicked his finger and shot out a golden light, which immediately turned into a golden chain and firmly bound it. It couldn't move and could only lie on the ground, panting weakly. Ji Tianxing didn't bother to waste time to force a confession. He directly used the Grand Spirit summoning technique and waved his hand to release a white light of divine soul, which enveloped its body. It rolled its eyes and fainted on the spot. Ji Tianqing invaded its divine soul and began to search through its memories. The demon expert's name was Tuesday. He had strength at the 9th firmament essence soul realm. He was the chief of a particular tribe and had lived for more than 800 years. 2 years ago, when Dark North Mountain was unified, he submitted to the Great Fiend Sage and became an elite combat general. Thanks to his ancestors, he was greatly appreciated by the Great Fiend Sage. He was like a fish in water under the Great Fiend Sage and learned a lot of secret information. His divine soul memories could be said to be as vast as the sea. They were like the river of stars in the sky, boundless and endless. When Ji Tianqing's consciousness came into contact with the river of memories, he immediately came into contact with boundless information and saw countless memories. His consciousness followed the river of memories and went against its flow, searching through Ntu's experiences and memories in reverse order. Especially the memories of the past 2 years, they were of utmost importance to his search. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing checked through Ntu's memories of the past 2 years. After analyzing and summarizing, he finally learned some secrets and found the information he wanted. Things were just as he had expected. All the changes in the North Underworld Mountain started 2 years ago. Before that, Dark North Mountain had been in hibernation for 10,000 years. Few demons stepped out of Dark North Mountain. Within Dark North Mountain, the 4 great fiend sages were constantly divided. They each had their own territories and ruled over hundreds to thousands of tribes. Only when the ancestor god returned and entered the ancient divine abyss of Dark North Mountain did the division that lasted for 10,000 years end. The 4 great fiend sages were forced by their ancestors to enter the ancient divine abyss to receive the ancestor god's baptism and bestowment. No one knew what the 4 great fiend sages experienced in the divine abyss. The demons only knew that when the 4 great fiend sages walked out of the divine abyss, they became even stronger. Furthermore, they were unexpectedly united and obeyed the ancestor god's orders. What happened next was self-evident. The 4 great fiend sages consolidated their factions and gathered large amounts of resources and brave hearts. They began sharpening their blades in preparation. A year ago, the 4 great fiend sages followed the ancestor god's orders and plans and gradually launched an attack on the Luo Shui divine nation. 8 months ago, the great fiend sage entered the ancient divine abyss alone to receive the ancestor god's orders. A few days later, the great fiend sage returned to the sacred palace with an ancient secret treasure. He gathered a few demon monarchs under his command, and chose 2 of them who were powerful and had special constitutions. The great fiend sage bestowed the ancient secret treasure to them and gave them a special mission. After that, every month or so, the 2 demon monarchs would bring back a few strange experts of different races. Those experts of different races would be sent to the ancient divine abyss to receive the ancestor god's secret refinement. In a total of 8 months, the 2 demon monarchs brought back more than 40 experts of different races. After those experts of different races were refined and demonized, they became the infamous blood-robed guards. Ntu heard the conversation between the great fiend sage and the 2 demon monarchs and knew that those experts of different races were experts that they had captured from other continents. Only then did Ntu know that there were other continents in the world. He was very curious about the outside world, so he looked for opportunities to get close to the 2 demon monarchs and ask them for information. When the 2 demon monarchs saw that he was being taken care of by the great fiend sage, they did not hide anything from him and told him a few things. Ntu gradually understood that the ancient secret treasure that the ancestor god had bestowed upon them was called the 9 Netherworld Soulbreaker Shuttle. This treasure could travel through the void in different spaces, and its effects were extremely powerful. However, only tribulation transcending powerhouses with special constitutions could use this treasure. Furthermore, it could only be used twice a month. Within 8 months, the 2 demon monarchs had traveled to several continents outside of the Shenwu continent. Their movements were very smooth, and they could freely travel between continents. Every time, they would capture a few experts of different races. There was only one continent that was extremely strange. It seemed to be protected by some kind of divine power, and even the 9 Netherworld Soulbreaker Shuttle could not enter. Chapter 1869. Ji Tianqing had learned many secrets from Antoine's soul memories. Of course, he could guess that the strange continent was the Tianxian continent. As for why the 9 Netherworld soul-shattering shuttle could not enter, he had some doubts. Although he had some guesses, he could not confirm the answer. Fortunately, there is only one 9 Netherworld soul-shattering shuttle, and it cannot enter the Tianxian continent. That's why I'm relieved, Ji Tianqing murmured to himself, revealing a relieved expression. Although he had recovered a lot of Kenshin's memories in the Shenwu continent, he still cared about his family. However, he was still concerned about his friends and family on the Tianxian land. He was unwilling to see the devil elite warriors invade and start a massacre on the Tianxian land. At this time, Ning Zongyun saw that Ji Tianqing had finished casting the spell, so he asked, Sir Ji, how do you plan to deal with this ghost? Of course I'll kill him. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and sent out a sacred white light that covered Antoine's body. Antoine's flesh was instantly corroded by the white light and quickly turned into a pile of black ash. Ji Tianqing straightened his clothes and cupped his hands towards Ning Zongyun. City Lord Ning, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Ning Zongyun and the other generals quickly bowed and said in unison, Farewell, Sir Ji. Ji Tianqing took Ji Bai and Shohei and flew into the sky as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing into the distance. Ning Zongyun and the others stood in place and watched Ji Tianqing's group disappear into the horizon. Only then did they withdraw their gazes and go about their own business. After leaving Kangyi City, Ji Tianqing summoned his black dragon and rode it towards the north. North of Kangyi City, 8,000 kilometers away, was the border, where a vast mountain range stretched endlessly. In less than an hour, the black dragon had crossed the vast mountain range and left the territory of the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom. As they continued to head north, they saw towering mountains and ancient forests along the way. This area was very vast, spanning tens of millions of kilometers. It was called the 100,000 Mountains. To the northwest of the 100,000 Mountains was the continent's largest peak, Tianzhu Mountain. In the northeast, it was connected to the gloomy North Underworld Mountain. In other words, between the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and the North Underworld Mountain, there was only 100,000 great mountains between them. 6 hours later, it was already late at night. The black dragon was flying high in the sky when Ji Tianqing's divine sense suddenly detected something strange. 100 miles to the right, in the pitch-black night sky, there was a 1,000 feet long flying boat, rushing towards the south. The gigantic flying boat was emitting billowing demonic qi, and its target was the border of the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom. It must be the demon army of the North Underworld Mountain rushing to the border of the divine nation to join the war. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. It would have been fine if you hadn't met me, but since I've bumped into you, then it's your bad luck. He muttered in a low voice and rushed to the right in a flash. In just a few breaths, he had quietly caught up to the pitch-black flying ship. A black and red flag with a ferocious demon god totem was hung on the huge airship. The body of the flying ship was also engraved with many demon gods and asuras, making it look ferocious. Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and vaguely detected that there were at least 2,000 demonic auras in the flying ship. Among them, one of the strongest auras had reached the second stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The other dozen or so auras were weaker, but they were all at the Essence Soul realm. The remaining 2,000 auras were all demon warriors at the Spirit Tempering realm. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to draw the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Holding the sacred sword with both hands, he slashed with all his might. Heaven-cleaving sword. The Sword of Burial of Heaven lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a giant golden sword that was 1,000 feet long. It slashed down from the sky towards the flying ship. Kaboom! Amidst the loud noise, the giant golden sword slashed the flying boat in the middle, cutting it in half on the spot. Dazzling bloody light and purple flames burst out. Although the flying ship was a low-grade Tribulation Transcendence artifact, it was protected by a powerful array. But in front of Ji Tianqing, under the Sword of Burial of Heaven, the flying ship was as fragile as paper, unable to withstand a single blow. Hundreds of demon warriors were flung out of the broken flying ship and fell to the ground in a sorry state. The dozen or so demon race experts did not expect to be attacked so suddenly, and were also in a panic. Before they could react, Ji Tianqing took advantage of the situation to pursue and slash out sword lights that filled the sky. Sword of Shattering Sun. 18 giant golden swords, carrying invincible divine power, ruthlessly slashed the two halves of the flying ship. Immediately, the two halves of the flying ship exploded into countless pieces and scattered in the night sky. At least 300 demon race soldiers were killed on the spot by the sword lights or the power of the explosion. Those who were lucky enough to survive were all injured, either lightly or heavily, and were fleeing in panic. Black Dragon and Ji by Xueqi hurriedly rushed up, spewing flames that covered the sky and slashing out endless sword lights, wantonly slaughtering the demon race soldiers. The dozen or so demon race experts roared angrily and rushed over. Half of them resisted Black Dragon and Ji by Xueqi, while the other half joined forces to besiege Ji Tianqing. The two sides engaged in a fierce battle in the night sky, fighting with all their might. A loud rumbling sound echoed fiercely between the mountains. The dazzling brilliance of magic power illuminated the night sky for 100 miles. This battle with a great disparity in strength only lasted for a quarter of an hour. The strongest demon race commander, who had the strength of the second layer of the Tribulation Transcendent stage, could not withstand 3 moves from Ji Tianqing, and his body and soul were destroyed. The dozen or so demon race generals of the primordial spirit realm did not last long, and were killed by Ji Tianqing and the others. As for the 2,000 or so demon race warriors, they were even weaker and not worth mentioning. Ji Tianqing and Ji by Xueqi slaughtered them like wheat, and a sword fell down a large number of them. After a quarter of an hour, more than 2,000 demon race warriors were all annihilated, turned into pieces of flesh and blood, and scattered in the mountain forest. Ji Tianqing did not even bother to collect the spoils of war. After taking back the holy sword, he continued to rush to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the next 20 days, Black Dragon flew 5 million miles continuously. Along the way, they also encountered several dangers, and were besieged by some ferocious demon beasts. After all, the 100,000 mountains was uninhabited, and it was the gathering place of all kinds of fierce demon beasts. According to ancient legends, a divine dragon had once appeared here. That evening, the sun was setting in the west. The dark golden sun was about to set in the west, and the world was covered with a layer of dim sunlight. The endless mountain range seemed even more vast and lonely. Black Dragon was flying thousands of feet high in the sky. Ji Tianqing stood on the dragon's back, and Ji Bai and Xueqi stood behind him. In front of everyone, about 500 miles away, a hazy gray shadow appeared at the end of the sky. That gray shadow was incomparably majestic, like a pillar supporting the sky, traversing between heaven and earth. The gray shadow stood in the mountains, and the top was submerged by the sea of clouds, as if it was connected to the sky. Seeing the figure of the giant peak, Ji Bai and Xueqi both showed a rare smile. Chapter 1870. Ji Tianqing stood motionless on the Black Dragon's back as he stared at the gigantic figure in the sky. Although his face was expressionless, his deep eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Without needing Ji Bai and Xueqi's reminder, he knew that the gigantic figure was Tianzhu Peak. In fact, his familiarity with Tianzhu Peak far exceeded that of Ji Bai and Xueqi. 1,000 years ago, he had traveled from west to east across the entire Shenwu continent, and had been in the world for more than 20 years. Along the way, he had challenged the powerhouses and top geniuses of various races and countries. He had won every battle without a single defeat. In the end, he had arrived at this vast mountain range. After searching for half a month, he had finally found the legendary backbone of the continent, the pillar that supported the heavens, Tianzhu Peak. Then, he had taken his few followers and occupied Tianzhu Peak, establishing a training ground and a sacred palace. Tianzhu Peak was isolated between heaven and earth. Although it was the highest peak and backbone of the entire continent, it could not gather the world's spiritual energy. Thus, he had used his ability to change the heavens and the earth, changing the layout of the 108 peaks around Tianzhu Peak. The 108 peaks formed a Big Dipper astral array and a Big Dipper spirit array. With Tianzhu Peak as the center, the area within 100,000 kilometers was enveloped by these two large arrays, forming a rarely seen sacred land of martial arts. Later, he had made a bold declaration that he would challenge all the martial saints in the world on Tianzhu Peak. In the next 20 years, the martial saints of various races had come to challenge him on the peak of Tianzhu Peak. Without a doubt, he had defeated all the martial saints who had come to challenge him, and his name had spread throughout the Shenwu continent. From then on, Kenshin's name had spread to every corner of the Shenwu continent, and he was revered by everyone. Every day, countless aspiring youths and martial artists from all over the world would rush to Tianzhu Peak to become Kenshin's disciple. Tianzhu Peak had become even more prosperous, and it had become one of the top sects in the world. Its power was second only to the three divine kingdoms. However, after he had left, the former prosperity had gradually withered away. Today, Tianzhu Peak had been reduced to a second-rate power and had been forgotten by the world. Ji Tianqing stood on the black dragon's back and looked at the gigantic figure that was getting closer and closer. Countless memories surfaced in his mind, and his mood became somewhat lonely and sorrowful. Ji Bai and Xueqi saw that he was silent and sensed that his aura was rather bleak, so they both shut their mouths. However, neither of them could guess what Ji Tianqing was thinking. The two of them thought that Ji Tianqing was in a bad mood because he was worried about the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After 100 breaths of time, the black dragon flew to the vicinity of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and stopped 1,000 feet above the ground. As he got closer, Ji Tianqing could see more clearly. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains in front of him was somewhat different from when he left back then. This giant mountain that covered an area of 1,000 miles and was tens of thousands of feet tall was no longer surrounded by spiritual energy like it used to be. Back then, there was a clear river at the foot of this giant mountain, like a belt of sparkling and translucent pearls. The entire mountain was shrouded in a thin layer of 5-colored spiritual light. Even in the dark of night, the 5-colored light would still flicker. Between the steep cliffs and the white sea of clouds, groups of spirit cranes would fly past from time to time, letting out crisp and high-pitched cries. At the peak of the mountain, there was a 5-colored waterfall that contained spiritual energy, pouring down from the cliff, like a rainbow hanging on the cliffs. Not only that, the almost straight cliffs were covered with vines and various small trees. Those very spiritual vines and small trees would bear fragrant and delicious spirit fruits, exuding a refreshing aroma of green wood. In short, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains in the past was like a paradise on earth, like a divine mountain where the gods lived. But now, the entire giant mountain was somewhat dark, losing the luster of spiritual energy, as if it was covered with a layer of dust. On the bare cliffs, there were only a few vines and trees, exposing large patches of gray-brown rocks. The foot of the mountain was covered with withered yellow leaves, and even the river that coiled around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had long been blocked by boulders and mud, turning into a lifeless pool. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and a thought flashed through his mind. As long as the great formation of heavenly spirits and earthly fiends is still operating, the surrounding 100,000 miles is the holy land of martial arts, a paradise. But in this situation, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is so thin. Could it be that the two great formations that I set up back then have been destroyed? He had a bad premonition, and his face became increasingly cold. The black dragon carried him and flew upwards, passing through the sea of clouds at a moderate speed, flying towards the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was really too high. More than 20,000 feet above the ground, it was covered by the sea of clouds. The mountain that surpassed the sea of clouds was still 80,000 feet high, definitely the highest in the world. Standing in the sea of clouds and looking at the surroundings, one could see a very spectacular scene. Below everyone's feet was a white sea of clouds, and there was nothing in all directions. Only the Pillar of Heaven's mountains stood in the sea of clouds, its peak connected to the blue and flawless sky. In the process of flying upwards, Ji Tianqing recalled some past events. Back then, I chose to set up a training ground here, firstly, because this place is the pillar that supports the heavens, symbolizing the unique status of being alone and far away. Secondly, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is 10,000 feet high, the mountain is straight and steep, and even ordinary birds can't reach the peak. Ordinary people want to learn from me, but they can't even reach the peak, so naturally, they will retreat, avoiding the trouble of taking the test. Indeed, back then, Kenshin's name spread all over the world, and countless geniuses came to learn from him. But those who could reach the peak were all outstanding people of the same generation. Those who were able to pass the 3 tests were even more exceptional martial arts geniuses. Therefore, none of the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains were mediocre. Not long later, the black dragon flew to the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains against the biting cold wind. The peak of the mountain was an open space with a radius of 300 miles, and the terrain was quite flat. Actually, when Kenshin came here, the peak of the mountain was uneven, and was full of jagged rocks. The height of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was actually 10,300 feet. In Kenshin's view, 9 was the limit, and exceeding it was as bad as falling short. A height of 9,999 feet meant that it was unparalleled in the world, and was at the peak of martial arts. Therefore, with a sweep of his sword, he shaved off 4 feet of the mountain peak, turning it into a flat piece of land. In the middle of this piece of land, he built an ancient holy city. The holy city was not big, but there were 18 magnificent palaces, and 36 magnificent houses. Around the ancient holy city, there were forests, herb gardens, mountain peaks, and so on, and there was also a beast garden for spiritual beasts. Back then, there were more than 1,000 disciples and odd job workers living in the holy city, as if they were immortals who were isolated from the world. How carefree and happy. This place was also the holy mountain closest to the sky, and one could reach out to touch the sky and pluck the stars. It was the most unique place. In Kenshin's heart, this was his favorite cultivation holy land, and even the god kingdoms of the 3 martial gods could not be compared to it. However, after 1,000 years. Chapter 1871. The forests, herb gardens and mountain peaks around the holy city were all withered and bleak, without much vitality. Especially the spirit beast garden in the east. There were many rare and precious spirit beasts. Not only were there groups of spirit cranes, there were also heavenly horses. But now, in the huge spirit beast garden, there were only a few spirit beasts. The gate and walls of the spirit beast garden were dilapidated, with broken bricks everywhere, and the ground was full of holes. The situation of the herb garden in the west of the holy city was not much better. The large formation that protected the herb garden had already disappeared, leaving only a few scattered small formations that were still flickering with a weak light. Most of the flower beds and herb gardens had turned into a grayish-brown wasteland, with many holes and ravines on the ground. Only a few innermost herb gardens were still planted with some herbs and spirit flowers. In short, Ji Tianqing stood on top of the mountain peak and looked around, only to see a scene of decay and withering. He could not believe that this gloomy, dilapidated and grey holy city was the holy land of martial arts that he had opened back then. Ji Bai and Xueqi had been standing behind Ji Tianqing, deeply feeling the change in his mood. Their mood was also somewhat heavy. With a gloomy face, they explained, "Master, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was definitely not like this in the past. This place was a top holy land of martial arts 1,000 years ago. It's just that in the past 1,000 years, many forces have been secretly plotting against us, causing our sect's power to continuously weaken, resulting in today's situation." Ji Bai and Xueqi knew that the current situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was really worrying. It had already reached a critical point. The two of them were absolutely loyal to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Naturally, they would not despise it, let alone have any thoughts of betrayal. However, some disciples with weak willpower had already started to escape. Therefore, when the two of them saw Ji Tianqing's grave expression, they were worried that Ji Tianqing would despise the decline of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Ji Tianqing did not say anything. He rode the black dragon over the forest and landed in the holy city. The layout of the holy city was rather peculiar. It was circular and sat on top of the mountain. The outer circle was 36 ancient houses, and the inner circle was 18 imposing palaces. In the middle of the holy city was a dojo with a radius of 100 miles. It was surrounded by many palaces and mansions. The huge dojo was paved with dozens of different kinds of stones, all of which were extraordinarily effective spirit stones and gemstones. The ground was dark green in color and was engraved with patterns and patterns of great formations. This formation with a radius of 100 miles was created by Kenshin and was known as the Firmament Formation. The Heavenly Dome Formation was the core of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It had 81 transformations and could transform into all sorts of formations with extraordinary effects. In the middle of the dojo stood a black stone tablet that was thousands of feet tall. It was like a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. Without a doubt, the towering black sword steel was based on the Sword of Burial of Heaven. It was also the totem of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Under the huge sword steel was a pedestal with a radius of 1,000 feet. There were many patterns and seal characters engraved on it. The lines of bold and powerful characters were also written by Kenshin. They were about the righteousness of the way of the sword and the rules of Tianzhu Mountain. Even after thousands of years, the black sword steel was still intact. It added a sense of vicissitudes to it. The black dragon landed on the dojo. Ji Tianqing looked at the sword steel. After looking at it for a while, his expression became much gentler. No matter how much the Pillar of Heaven's mountains declined, No matter how disappointing the disciples were, the sword steel was still intact. At the very least, the dojo and the sword steel had been preserved, which was a blessing in disguise. Ji Tianqing stood under the sword steel and stared at the pedestal with a complicated gaze. He looked at the patterns and words on the black stone wall. The lines of bold and powerful characters emitted an unparalleled domineering aura and sword intent. Even after thousands of years, the ancient characters seemed to have come alive. They made people not dare to look at them directly. They were filled with reverence. As a master, I will not hide anything. I will not hesitate to die for my disciple. Only then can I have a long history. These words came from Kenshin. They were written before the rules of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. It was the general outline of the 36 rules of the sect. 1,000 years ago, the martial masters and disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains always remembered these words and engraved them in their hearts. Therefore, 1,000 years ago, the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains was known as the #1 sect under the heavens. Ji Tianqing silently recited the general outline of the sect rules. His gaze gradually moved up and looked at the sky along the sword steel. Suddenly, he raised his head and laughed. Ha 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 ha. The endless river flows to the east. The waves wash away the heroes. Right and wrong, success and failure vanish in the blink of an eye. The holy mountain is still here. The sunset is still red. The white-haired fisherman and woodcutter on the river, accustomed to the autumn moon and spring breeze, meet again with a pot of turbid wine. How many things have happened in the past and the present? Chapter 1872. The few elders were puzzled. They did not understand why the white-haired Taoist had such an intense reaction. The sword steel in the middle of the training field was the sacred sword totem of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. It had a sacred meaning. That unfamiliar white-robed youth was actually shouting insolently under the holy sword. This was simply too disrespectful. Even the few elders saw Ji Bai and Xueqi following behind the white-robed youth. Everyone could guess that the white-robed youth could be the successor of Kenshin. But in everyone's opinion, since he was the successor of Kenshin, he should be respectful towards Kenshin and the sacred sword. But the white-haired Taoist was the leader of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Even he did not get angry, nor did he scold the white-robed youth. Instead he showed a protective attitude. This made everyone even more puzzled. Why would the yellow dragon immortal have such a reaction? Just as the few elders were bewildered and secretly puzzled, the white-haired Taoist quickly rushed to the center of the training field. His expression was very complicated. He was full of anticipation, but also a little uneasy. His eyes stared at the white-robed figure. In a short 10 breaths, everyone arrived under the 1,000 feet tall sword steel. Ji Bai and Xueqi came back to their senses and quickly greeted everyone. Greetings, great immortal and elders. The two of them respectfully bowed and then stood at the side, waiting for orders. Ji Tianqing's emotions gradually calmed down. He turned to look at the white-haired Taoist and the few elders. When he and the white-haired Taoist looked at each other, their pupils shrank, their eyes flashed with a touch of splendor. Especially the white-haired Taoist. His body trembled, his eyes widened, and he let out a low roar in his heart. It's him. It's really him. It's definitely Master. That appearance, that aura, that gaze. It's definitely the same. The few elders had joined the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains later. They had not seen the original body of Kenshin. But the white-haired Taoist was Kenshin's follower and guard-come disciple. He was very familiar with everything about Kenshin. Even after 1,000 years, he could still clearly remember Kenshin's gaze, aura, and every move. At this moment, the white-haired Taoist's old eyes welled up with hot tears. He could no longer hold back the excitement and sorrow in his heart. He bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing. Unfilial disciple Huang Long greets Master. Ever since the sword god left the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, Huang Long had been missing his master for the past 1,000 years. Especially after the news of the sword god's death spread, Huang Long was even more devastated. However, he remembered his master's teachings and shouldered the heavy responsibility of protecting the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. No matter how much pain he felt, he had always persevered. No one knew how many hardships and sufferings he had endured in the past 1,000 years. No one knew how big of a blow the news of the sword god's death was to him. Now that Taoist and Taoist was the heavens and earth, and Taoist not feel the heavens and earth. The yearning and remembrance that had lasted for 1,000 years had caused his state of mind to completely fall apart. At this moment, he felt as if he had returned to 1,500 years ago, when he first climbed the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and became Kenshin's disciple. That was why he performed a disciple's salute in front of everyone. His deep bow contained too many emotions. Other than himself, only Ji Tianxing could understand it. Ji Bai and Xueqi were dumbfounded. They stared at the Huanglong Taoist, their eyes full of shock. The 5 elders were also stunned. They stared at the Huanglong Taoist and couldn't help but exclaim, "Great Immortal! What are you doing? Great Immortal, please get up. You've got the wrong person. That's Kenshin's successor." The elders reminded the Huanglong Taoist. 2 elders even reached out to help him up. However, the Huanglong Taoist was a martial saint. He didn't move at all and maintained his bowing posture. Who could help him up? Ji Tianxing also looked at him with a complicated gaze. He looked at his old and white Taoist robe, his white hair that reached his waist, and his aged face. His heart was heavy and filled with emotion. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and suppressed his complicated emotions. He smiled and said, "Huanglong, we haven't seen each other for 1,000 years. How's your cultivation of the Imperial Sword Sutra? Master didn't personally guide you. You're not slacking off again, are you?" Ji Tianxing's voice was gentle and calm, but there was a sense of pressure. When the Huanglong Taoist heard this familiar voice, his body trembled. He couldn't help but burst into tears. 1,500 years ago, when he was cultivating with Kenshin, he often had to wait for a long time to see Kenshin. Every time he saw Kenshin, Kenshin would ask him about his cultivation. Especially in the last 20 years, Kenshin would ask him about his cultivation of the Imperial Sword Sutra every time. However, the Imperial Sword Sutra was an incomparably profound sword technique. His cultivation progress was very slow. When he met Kenshin, he was scared witless. He was afraid of being scolded by Kenshin and even more afraid of disappointing Kenshin. Since Kenshin left, he thought that he would never hear these words again in his life. However, he had never imagined that after 1,000 years, he would once again hear those familiar words. Moreover, they were exactly the same as before. He raised his sleeve to wipe away the tears on his old face. He replied with a trembling voice, "Master, disciple has already comprehended the first 7 levels of the Imperial Sword Sutra. Now, I have reached the 8th level." Ji Tianxing showed a gratified smile and nodded. "Not bad. The 7th level is the biggest threshold. Once you enter the 8th level, you can hide your sword in the void and travel 1,000 miles. The 2 of them, one old and one young, were like master and disciple, conversing with each other in a serious manner. The 5 elders, Ji Bai and Xueqi, had long been at a loss. They were all speechless and stunned on the spot. Everyone's expression and eyes were very strange. But no one dared to speak and interrupt this strange scene in front of them. The elders looked at each other and shook their heads. They were in grief as they discussed with each other. Sigh. The pitiful great immortal misses the martial ancestor too much. He actually treated that person as the martial ancestor. Crazy. They are all crazy. The great immortal has become muddle-headed. Even that kid has gone crazy. We can't let them go on like this. If the disciples of the sect see this, what will happen? Yes. The great immortal is the only remaining martial saint in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. He is also our teacher. We can't let him be humiliated and teased like this. That kid is the martial ancestor's successor in vain. He is actually so rude. It is too disappointing." Just as the elders were secretly discussing, Ji Tianxing had already raised his hand and helped Huanglong Taoist up. Huanglong Taoist looked up at his face. His old face was filled with excitement and respect. Ji Tianxing looked at him kindly and said with a smile, "All right, now that you are a 1,000-year-old monster who has become an immortal, how can you lose your bearing? Don't let the juniors see you as a joke. No matter what the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain is today, since I have returned, I will purge the enemy and restore the glory of the sect." Huanglong Taoist nodded and said with a firm tone, "Huanglong has long known and always believed that a godly person like Master will never fall. You are destined to move unhindered in the universe and be the only one in the world." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.